I call to reconvene this evening's school committee meeting. Welcome to the Monday, August 27th, 2018 meeting of the Long Meadow School Committee. I call the meeting to order. The meeting's being recorded and aired by LCTV, as well as being live streamed on longmeadow.org. It's a legal requirement for anyone else to disclose if they are recording this meeting. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, our business with guests is our joint meeting with the Select Board in order to fill the school committee vacancy and conduct our interviews. The school committee and the Select Board will interview the following candidates for the vacancy on the school committee: Heather Goldstein, Jeffrey Klotz, James Ryan, Jill Shaw, and Armand Ray. I will turn the meeting over to Mark Gold.
Thank you. I'm going to call the Select Board meeting to order as a joint meeting with the school committee. This evening, as Beth indicated, we're here to interview applicants for the vacancy that exists currently on the school committee. And I just want to go over a little bit of the ground rules this evening. My understanding is that all the applicants have received these in an email, but just so that people at home understand what's going on, we're going to draw lots from the candidates to select the order in which they will be interviewed or questioned. And the Select Board and school committee members will also draw lots because we'll be alternating between Select Board members and school committee members on the questions they will get. Each candidate, when it's their time to be interviewed, will come up to the microphone and will give have up to 3 minutes to give a statement as to why they should be appointed to the school committee. That statement will then be followed by a question period for that candidates. We'll ask questions in the order in which our lots were drawn. Again, each person gets to ask a question, and if needed, a follow-up question, and then we'll go to the next person, and we'll, after a round of questions concluded, we'll go to a second round, a third round, until we've all run out of questions. At that point, the first candidate will be excused, the second candidate will come up, we'll have a chance to make up to 3 minutes presentation or statement, and then that candidate will be questioned as well. Tonight, our purpose is only to interview candidates according to in accordance with our town bylaws. We will not be making an appointment tonight, but rather must wait between a minimum of 7 days, a maximum of 30 days. We're currently scheduled to reconvene next Tuesday, September 4th, for our appointment, at which point we will be taking a vote. The process by which we vote was also explained to the candidates. We've distributed it. We'll be going over it again at that point on next Tuesday. But at that point, again, we will be voting in a particular order, and for candidates, a candidate must have a majority of those voting, a vote by the majority of those voting, not just a plurality of those voting. So we're going to have a little bit of housekeeping as we go through our lottery system. If they have to, one just thing I'll tell the members of the Select Board, I think everybody's come with questions. I got more questions than I can possibly ask, more than I possibly want to ask. So if anybody wants copies of some questions here, they're happy to. You're welcome to take some of mine, but they can certainly use their own. Anyway, so what I'd like to do now is just start by, I've got a paper bag, and we've got letters A through E, which represents the 5 candidates. And so we're going to, in no particular order, kind of crunch these up and stick them in the bag. And walk around and have everybody draw a number. Who's stealing my computer? Each of the departments, I don't know which one you're going to get.
The W's always last.
Yeah, you can draw them, okay? So we just want to record for the purpose purposes of recording what letters each person got, so I'm just going to call a name. If you can tell me what your letter is. Heather Goldstein?
C.
Excuse me?
C.
C, thank you. Jeffrey Klotz?
E as in echo.
Thank you. James Ryan?
D as in Delta.
Thank you. Jill Shaw?
A is an academic.
Okay, and Armin? Ray?
As in boy.
Thank you. So, okay, so the order is going to be Jill Shaw first, Armin Ray second, Heather Goldstein third, James Ryan fourth, and Jeffrey Klotz fifth. This is an open meeting, so I guess the draw, or the luck of the draw, or the unluck of the draw says that folks who aren't here, aren't being interviewed, can't stay in the room. It is an open meeting. The next thing we're going to do is just go through the school committee and the select board to draw lots. So what I'm going to do is just, Beth, if you just grab one, well, you don't need,
I don't.
Beth and I don't need to grab one. The rules are, we get to go first and second, so just pull one and then we'll.
Who made the rules?
You voted on the rules, Richard.
Check it.
No, they don't have any. I got to put more in for them.
Oh, we don't get any.
No, you do, but it's a different numbers. So what-
This need-
Because
no,
two-
because Tom's not
This
here.
is, I need to be an engineer to understand this.
I think so.
Okay, is this 9 or 6?
It's a 6, because we don't have 9s.
Oh, so we're not going, okay.
So I think that's
Okay, so we're just going to,
Well, yeah.
if we can just get, who's got number 3? Okay,
Bronwyn.
okay, hold on, we're gonna. And somebody over here has got number 4, Bill Lowe. And number 5, Ryan, thank
Ryan.
you. And 6 is Marie.
Wait a minute.
Yours is 9.
I must be a nine.
Yes.
then. You said there was no nine.
Not on your side. Yours is-
There's no
Say it.
line.
Yep.
No, 7. Okay,
Stephanie.
Okay, 8, Richard. Okay, 9 is
Melanie.
Melanie, okay. There is no 10, well, 10 is going to be Tom Lucusa when he gets here.
And that leaves Karen.
Last but not least.
Karen at number
Okay,
11.
okay, so the order in which we will ask questions are Beth, myself, Bronwyn, Bill, Ryan, Marie, Stephanie, Richard, Melanie, Tom, and Karen. And if Tom's not here yet, then we'll just move on. So we're going to move without him. So unless there are any comments by members of the Select Board, School Committee, proposing we move forward. And our first applicant is Jill Shaw. So Ms. Shaw, if you'd step up, please. Yeah, have a seat. And the microphones don't amplify in this room, but they are necessary for LCTV. So if you'd like to make a statement, you have up to 3 minutes to make a statement, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jill Shaw, and I'm a resident of Long Meadow, Massachusetts. I've only lived in Long Meadow for 1 year. However, my children have had the opportunity to attend Long Meadow schools as my spouse is an employee, and we took advantage of that opportunity as part of the teacher contract. We've had the opportunity to also have our children attend school in other communities, and our children made the decision to want to come to Long Meadow, and certainly we supported that. Being in Long Meadow has been a wonderful experience, I think, academically. When your children have the opportunity to attend the best of the best, it's always a win-win situation. Again, we moved in roughly a year ago. However, our kids have been involved in sports programs. We've been involved in the community for many, many years. I think I've been very impressed with what the school system has to offer, but also what the community has to offer. I work as an area clinical manager for the Department of Children and Families, and I have essentially committed my life service to working with children. I've been with the agency for 27 years, and before that, I worked in another contracted agency working with children. Additionally, I've donated my time with youth sports. I've coached basketball at the collegiate level. I've coached lacrosse at the youth level. Currently, I coach high school basketball in another community. And I just think it's a wonderful way to teach children about the lessons and the life lessons through sports. And I think, in Long Meadow, it's been a great opportunity for our kids to participate in not only the academic world, but also in the sports world and in the other various many clubs that the community offers. I think, my involvement in the town, with our children attending in the sports world, in other, club opportunities, along with my work dealing with the Department of Children and Families. As I mentioned, I'm an area clinical manager, so I have the opportunity to work. I'm second in command running one of it's actually the largest office in the state. So, I'm in charge of a multi-million-dollar budget. So, understanding policy and procedures and budgetary implications, I think it would be a good opportunity, to be a member of the school committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Beth, start with questioning with you.
I will start with my first question, which, if successful in seeking an appointment to the school committee, you become part of a governance team that is tasked in part with making policy and contract decisions that may not always be looked upon favorably by the residents of the town. How would you handle making these hard decisions that will benefit the students and the district, but in a small community such as Long Meadow, may be at odds with other members of the governance team or your friends and neighbors?
So, I think, I have the opportunity to do that every day in the work that I do with the department. Oftentimes, when you're monitoring the budget and I'm in charge of higher level placements, some of the decisions that I make are not always the most favorable, but, they're the necessary decisions. In my time with the agency, I would suggest that I am conflict confident, so I don't have a problem, supporting the decisions I make and why I make them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Under the theory that even the best organization can use some new ideas, what changes would you like to see implemented in the school department, and how would you go about affecting them from position on the school committee?
So, I think as a member of the team, I would operate within the confines of the team and certainly, make suggestions, but understand that, it's a group decision. One of the things that I think is really important is the opportunity to give back. And I think when you look at the students and the population that you have here in Long Meadow, I think it's, clearly an asset for most other communities to have involvement from our youth. So I think perhaps developing a community service component, perhaps at the high school level, would be significant and would be an opportunity for our students to give back to other communities that haven't had as many opportunities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What do you think is the most critical issue facing our schools right now?
I think that, certainly with the complexity of students and with families and the multifaceted issues that both children and families face today, I think oftentimes budgetarily, there's decisions that have to get made that aren't always as favorable as folks would like. And I think that there's some of the challenges that face most communities. So I would suggest that.
Bill?
Jill, describe your view of the roles of the school committee and the superintendent And what is the ideal relationship between the two?
So I think, the role as a school committee is to operate within the policy, or I say policy because that's what I'm accustomed to, but within the policy and the budgetary restrictions that you have for the school. My thought is that it is it's a cooperative relationship. I mean, certainly, you may not always see eye to eye, but I think, in theory that you're working for the best interest of the community, for particularly the school committee.
Ryan?
Not the school committee, I'm sorry, the school. Not the school committee, my apologies. So the best interest of the school.
Ryan?
Thanks. How will you know when a program or decision has been successful?
It's a great question. That's a good question. How would you know? I think that, generally speaking, without having a specific program in mind, I think that as a school committee, when you identify a particular program, there's goals that you set that need to be reached, and I would suggest that assessing whether those goals have been met would tell you whether it's been successful or not.
Thank you. Marie?
Where do you feel that Long Meadow is weakest academically, and how would you approach the issue?
I think, from my experience, and obviously that's the most I can speak to, is I think it's weakest in the areas of when you have problematic behavioral type students, kind of managing those behaviors, adding additional supports in place, and maintaining them in the school district.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Hi.
How are you?
Good. What major initiative would you be interested in making or supporting in the coming year?
But I'm not sure what initiatives you guys have on the table, so did you want to speak to that, or you want me to
You
come up
could
with
talk
my
about
own?
something that you would want to bring, or you could speak about initiatives that are in process. Or
Mhm. So again, I think, creating a community service base for students, I think, is a very valuable tool. I think there's lots of opportunities for students to get involved both locally and in other communities. I think it's invaluable for those that you help, but I also think it is also invaluable for the students that take part in that. And I've seen students, kind of go through the motions and get somebody to sign off on it. As I mentioned, I coach basketball in another community, and a lot of what we do is try and give back to the community. So we've done things like serve at the soup kitchen. We run a Special Olympics basketball tournament. We go to a nursing home. We do a food drive, things of that nature. And when kids actively participate in it, it's really amazing to see what they're able to get out of it.
Thank you. Mr. Foster?
Yes, Jill, we currently have a statement of interest out for the replacement and/or combining of our middle schools. Can you share with me some of your thoughts you may have on that?
So I think it's a good idea in terms of support for financial backing on that. I'm not sure, where folks are at, given that budgetarily taxes have gone up due to high school, and that cost hasn't been replaced, the building of the new DPW, I think. So in terms of fiscally, I think it may be a hardship for some folks. I think from a school perspective, I think it's a benefit.
Follow up?
Sure.
Why?
Why, which part?
Why is it a benefit?
Because I think, in particular, Williams Middle School is a very aging school. I think the building in and of itself is, I wouldn't say up to par. And I think it, you know, from looking at other communities where students are together in middle school, I just think it's a natural transition for high school.
Nolan?
Hi, how are you?
Did you have the opportunity to watch any of the school committee meetings last year or attend?
I did not.
And if I may follow up, so you talked about what you felt were the role and responsibility. What's your familiarity with like the day-to-day grind of in terms of your commitment of being, you know, here or at meetings or subcommittees, and do you have any familiarity with
Right.
that
I mean,
commitment?
so I understand that the committee meets twice a month in the evenings currently is what my understanding is. And that there's other subcommittees and other initiatives that you may take part in. And so, you know, coming forward, I'm someone that if I'm going to make a commitment to it, I'm going to make a whole commitment to it. So it's certainly something I'd be interested in willing to do.
Lisa's not here yet, so Karen?
Hi, Jill. Thank
Hi,
you
Lori.
so much for putting in your application. So I ask this question because I truly believe that it's important to understand your colleagues and the goals of a team before you take on any commitment or task. Whether it be to know that you're aligned and moving in the same direction, or to understand and recognize the challenges that you will face with your team. So with that in mind, have you attended any meetings, watched them, met with any members of the school committee to discuss how and if your goals align with the current members? And if so, do your goals align with the current members?
So again, as Melanie just asked, I have not watched or attended any last year. I did certainly follow some of the things that were going on in the latter part of the school year, and discussed with some people that had been on the team. I would suggest that my views align with some, but certainly I haven't had the opportunity to talk with all of you, so I certainly wouldn't be able to say that my views align with everyone here.
Thank you. Beth?
I have a second question specific to you, Joe. And thank you also for applying and coming tonight to answer all of our questions. So in looking over your resume, I found your work-life experience to cover policy, community service, the budget process, and outreach with children, which I would imagine gives you a unique perspective on the social-emotional well-being of kids and adolescents. While all of those are valuable skills to leverage within the school committee, which one do you feel you've really developed over your career?
I would suggest, you know, I think my social-emotional work with children, you know, has been wonderful and plentiful. I would suggest in the last 10 years, it's been more an administrative perspective. I still do have the opportunity to deal with children and with parents, and I take advantage of those opportunities whenever possible, for the most part. But I would suggest that, again, it's been more administrative. So, and in particular in the last 2.5 years, it's really been about managing the budget. As I took a promotion 2.5 years ago, it's really been about managing the budget and ensuring that we're operating within the confines of the budget, ensuring that we are operating within our policy, ensuring that the staff is operating within the policy, addressing concerns that from families, complaints, and really ensuring that our staff is educated on the budget. You know, we certainly have trainings, but subsequent training, things of that nature.
Thank you very much.
Joe, what have you done in the last 3 years as a member of an organized group that you could point to as evidence that you'll be able to exert influence and affect change if appointed to the school committee?
Sure. So a couple of things. Again, as I mentioned, you know, I coach at the high school level. I've coached in a couple of different communities. I volunteer my time as a religious education teacher. And then that's outside of work. Within work, I've been on many projects. I was the chair for a subcommittee on developing service for sexually exploited children. I have I created a Western region-wide basketball tournaments for children that are in foster care. We participated in that at Westfield State. And then most recently, I developed a sibling connection group for children that are separated in placement, as generally speaking, children that are come into foster care aren't often placed together, unfortunately. And so they generally have a visit once a week with their parent, and oftentimes you watch children vying for the parent's attention. So we do it every other month. We do a sibling connection where it's just siblings. We do it in a non-sterile environment and give them the opportunity to enjoy family time.
Ron?
If you had to set one specific goal for the Long Meadow School Committee to accomplish this year, what would it be?
To operate within the budget.
Thank you. Bill?
How should teacher performance be measured, and what are some of the challenges inherent in evaluating teachers?
What are some of the?
What are some of the challenges inherent in evaluating teachers?
Bless you. So, I have a number of peers or friends, I would say, that are teachers. And in terms of evaluating teachers, I think it's turned a lot to, MCAS scores is a way to evaluate teachers, and I think in some regards that, it has some value to it, but I certainly don't think that all the value should be put on that. You come in, certainly with students are not all at the same academic level, and getting some kids to reach that bar is difficult at best. So I think there's a myriad of ways in which to evaluate teachers, peer performance, peer interaction, peer evaluation. I think I certainly know that there's department chairs here that certainly offer feedback to teachers and evaluate teachers. So I think it's a myriad of ways. And I think that, oftentimes peer-to-peer evaluation is very, very beneficial. Most often I find that, most people have a lot of respect for their peers, so I think that's one advantageous way to provide some feedback.
Ryan?
Thank you. So part of our job is to build consensus and support for the things that we're doing here in the district. So what groups or people might you be able to bring into a meeting to help us do that?
Well, I fortunately have a lot of connections with a lot of folks, and I, wouldn't be able to tell you offhand who it would be. I guess it would depend on, what the topic was. I'm fortunate in my role. I've, have access to a number of folks that we work with. If you want to cite something in particular, I might be able to respond better. We have a lot of a lot of connections with counseling groups, with mental health groups, with substance abuse groups, with the district attorney's office.
That's great. Thank you.
Marie?
No second question, thank you.
Thank you.
Just point out to everybody that's eventually we're going to get there. Steph?
So some years we go when nobody wants to apply for school committee, and then we go at other years where you have a lot of people applying. So was there anything in particular that motivated you to come forward for this seat, and do you anticipate, if you were to have it for the year, running for a 3-year seat after?
So I think what motivated me was just kind of timing. It wasn't something that I had necessarily previously thought about, but I think the timing is the time is kind of appropriate in my life right now. My children are they're teenagers, and though I'm always looking to spend time with them, they're always looking to go somewhere else. So I just think right now is the time that I have time, and it's really piqued my interest, and again, talking with a lot of my friends that are teachers and other members that have previously been on school committee, and again, within the department, I've had the opportunity, to advocate for children and work on their educational needs and developing, what IEP would work for this particular child, or what education, school certainly is responsible for that child. So I've had those opportunities. And so, again, it just seems to be the right time for me. And in terms of, is it something that I would consider doing long-term? I think it was a positive experience, absolutely.
Richard?
Yeah, maybe a little odd question. I know you made reference to all the sports teams that you're on, and it's a pretty popular subject in a town of Longmeadow. We hear it a lot up here for our recreational fields and all. I rarely hear anybody talk about vocational training or gifted education, and I would like to know what your opinions are on that. We do not have vocational, per se, shops or anything anymore in our schools, and yet there's a lot of national headlines that said we're leaving a segment of our population behind. And also our
Absolutely.
gifted education, we are denying a lot of opportunities to gifted educated children. So go from there.
I think you're absolutely right, and I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I talked to my oldest son about trying to do the tech program. He doesn't want any parts of it, but I think it's a great opportunity for students, and I do think it's something that that is not being taken advantage of. And when you just look at society today and the way in which it's moving, there's a lot of success in those fields, and I think as we look at college debt, and it's the highest debt that students are dealing with these days. Oftentimes kids are coming out of college and they're in debt for umpteen years. I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it's an untapped resource. Absolutely.
Ms. Miller?
So just to elaborate on your availability in the evening, so given that each of the school committee members sit on 3 to 4 subcommittees and/or appointments, which include but aren't limited to finance, capital policy, evaluation, negotiation, high school start time, tax ceiling task force, possible middle school working group, a wellness committee, and other appointed roles such as paying the warrants and payroll, sitting on the MEDCO or LPVEC boards, being a member of SEAL, and also having school appointments. Given your coaching at your high school level coaching, I know for my daughter playing basketball, it can run from November to March or the end of March, and it's daily. For her, so for you as a coach, how do you see again your role being able to be here in the evening? When we are sitting on
Sure.
3, 4, 5.
Sure.
Subcommittees, as well as the bi-monthly meetings, and something that always comes up, like tonight.
So, again, I do coach basketball. It starts the Monday after Thanksgiving, so essentially it's not really November, it's December, and it finishes up in February. In terms of that, could I say I could make absolutely every single thing? Possibly not. However, I'm fortunate enough that I have 3 other people on the coaching staff with me, so if it wasn't a game, it's something I could certainly work around.
Tom?
Okay, well, I was also a coach at West Springfield High School.
Fantastic.
Yeah, on the wrestling team.
Go Terriers.
So, when you look at your experience as a coach and you're working with the school committee, could be any carryover that you think of in terms of approaching this team of folks who are responsible for keeping our schools running smoothly?
So what exactly is your question? I'm not sure what your
So the
question
question is, what do you think is some carryover between being a coach and from working on this team that keeps the schools running?
Right.
smoothly?
So, I think teamwork is essential to be successful really in any venue. And I think when you're working with an array of folks that come from different backgrounds and offer different things. I think it's really important and critical to, listen to everybody's perspective and everybody's shared experience. I think, everybody brings something different to the table. So I certainly find that in coaching. I find it in my, my professional world right now, and I would suggest the same on really on any team or committee that I've been on.
Okay, thanks.
Karen?
So I see that you identified a possible conflict that your spouse is an employee at Long Meadow High School. So I just wanted to delve a little deeper and see if you could identify where you see that might come as a conflict and how you would deal with it if it was a conflict.
So I think, I identify right away, what I think is a potential conflict. In terms of what the potential conflict would be, obviously voting on teachers' contracts. I mean, I do think you should give them $1 million. I'm kidding. I think that would be a potential, conflict, and I obviously would identify that. In terms of anything else, as I mentioned, I'm pretty conflict confident, and also in the work that I do, confidentiality is essential. And so I recognize that in the work that I do and the need for that at the school committee as well.
Pass, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Just, I guess my only question is, did you consider running for re-election, or running for election this past June when the elections were, and would you run for re-election if you were appointed?
So, no, I didn't consider it in June. This past June, no, I did not. It wasn't, I just didn't really think about it. And would I consider running again? Again, I would, as long as I felt like I was contributing and that it, I was an active member of the team. I think if I have something to contribute and it's a valuable experience and something I would consider running again for.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bill?
I'm good.
Okay. Ryan?
No, pass.
Okay. Let's see, Marie? No, you can jump back in, though, if you want. You're allowed to jump back in. Stephanie?
All set.
All set? Okay, Richard?
All set?
Okay. Melanie?
I do have one more.
Okay.
So having your own kids attending Long Meadow Public Schools, I know for myself because I do, what is your comfort level with not only making decisions for the schools as a whole or a group of children, but when you actually have to advocate for your own child, where it might be an uncomfortable or negative or unfavorable, it might lend you in that position with staff or administration when it comes to your own personal child?
So I think, I'm not sure, but on this, with the school committee, I mean, I would advocate for what I thought was best, for the school as a whole, not for my child in particular. And I think when I've had to advocate for my own child, it could be problematic as my, spouse works in the high school, my students attend in the high school. So if my particular decision on something was contrary to what the school felt, that would also, could potentially be adversarial for my spouse. So, I mean, I personally, I kind of feel like they're separate. If I had to advocate for my child in a specific way, I would advocate for my child, but that wouldn't necessarily impact my thought on what's best for the school as a whole. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I guess, just in advocating in general, do you have any feelings on how you would feel as a parent with your child attending the school, on decisions that have to be made or, directions? Do you have any reservation at all about the position that might put your child in or you in?
I may put my child in a particular position, but not me. I'm very honest and transparent with my children about, my perspective and my views. I don't anticipate it being a problem. And if it was a problem, I would speak to them honestly and transparently about what my perspectives are. And, the reality is, whatever decision I make in life they're not always going to be favorable decisions. They're not going to be viewed, in a favorable way by everybody, and I deal with that on a daily basis. It certainly doesn't impact my children, but it's something I do.
Distinction that I was, hoping to make when it does affect your child. Excuse me, my allergies.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah. One of the big decisions that could be coming up fairly soon would be about the middle school. I don't know if you've addressed that already.
Yep.
Yeah. But I was just curious about, did you favor one plan or the other? Like, there's the three that seem to be on the table for me, and one would be to build 2 new schools. Another would be to build 1 middle school that would carry both kids. Or actually, another one would be to have maybe one school that's really 2 different middle schools in one building. And then the last would be to have K-8 programs. And so of those options, would you lean towards one or the other? Have you thought much about it?
So my own personal opinion would be 1 middle school. I think it's beneficial. I think it eases the transition to high school. I personally would be opposed to a K through 8 program, as I'm not sure that always benefits the smaller children. I think kind of, when you're looking at 5-year-olds, compared to, say, 13, 14-year-olds, perspectives are very, very different. So, I would be inclined to go with 1 school.
Thank you.
Karen?
I'm all set, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions, since we've kind of gone around? I know, Tom, you got a couple of chances, but
Yeah.
it looks like most people have passed, but any more opportunities? No? Well, everybody seems to be all set. So, Ms. Shaw, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome to stay. It is an open meeting, or
Thank you.
you can, not necessarily. Mr. Ray? Welcome, and as we have with all the other candidates, you've got 3 minutes. Up to 3 minutes. Go ahead.
I'll try and keep it far shorter than 3 minutes. My name is Armin Ray. For those of you who don't know me, I live at 19 Longfellow Drive with my wonderful wife, Catherine. My 3 children, Chloe, who is a senior at the high school this year, my daughter, Amelia, who will be 8th grader at Glenbrook, and my son, James, who will be 4th grade at Center School. It's been a privilege to live in this town. My family and I moved here in 2006, a year after my daughter, Chloe, was accepted by the Longmeadow Public Schools as school choice. We had the Longmeadow schools already, which most people move to town for with the young children. We moved here because we loved Longmeadow and wanted to be a part of that community. We already had the schools through school choice, but we didn't have the full experience, and that's why we moved here. Based upon that love for the town that embraced us, family, friends, just, wonderful friends all around, a couple years after, I decided to run for school committee. First time it was, again, an appointment position. I did not get it. The following year I did run. I came in 4th in a 6-person race. So like you said, sometimes there's a big race, sometimes there's a little race. That year was big, and then soon after, Jim Natoli, a good friend of ours, moved to Texas, and I was appointed to Jim's spot, where I served until, for 3 years, until the 3 years, November 2011, 2012. When my company merged with another large company, and I didn't have the 20 hours a week that I needed to serve correctly. And I fully understand what it takes to be a positive, impactful member of the school committee and the time commitment it takes. I'm at a different point in life now. I have an 18-year-old or 17, soon to be 18-year-old who can drive and can drive the other kids around. So I'm at a different position now. I have time. And I think that I would be able to bring the experience to bear building the high school. I was the chair of the school committee during groundbreaking. I was on the school committee when we got the statement of interest approved. So I think I bring that kind of experience on that. Chair of the finance subcommittee for a number of years, to the budget, working with Mr. Gold on a lot of the budget issues early on. Such that experience, I think, could be immediately impactful to this committee, and I would hope to be a positive force for change. So that's why I'm applying, and I hope you consider me for the position.
Thank you. Beth?
Okay, hi, thanks for coming tonight and applying for the position. I'm going to go with my, one of my original questions. If successful in seeking an appointment to the school committee, you become part of a governance team that's tasked in part with making policy and contract decisions that may not always be looked upon favorably by the residents of the town. How would you handle making these hard decisions that'll benefit the students and the district, but in a small community like ours, may be at odds with other members of the governance team or even your friends and neighbors?
Yeah, I think the great thing about our town is that everybody, in the end, understands that everybody's trying to do the right thing, regardless of what that position is. I can tell you when we brought forth the statement of interest for the high school, it was not received happily by everybody in the community. In fact, we had some really long and hard discussions about that and what was the proper way to go. I know, Mr. Lacuzzi, you were just talking about there was different types of plans, and we had the same thing. Did we renovate the old building? Did we do a half reno, half new? Did we do all new? And in the end, we had to listen to, all the different sides and voices. And we had the Lance of Pride, we had the other group, and in the end, we did what was best for Long Meadow, and everybody understood that and got along in the end. So I think we have a community that can have differences, that can have a great discussion around those differences, and then still come together as friends at the end of the day because it's not personal.
Thank you.
So Armin, you may have heard, but the town is at some point approaching the Prop 2.5 cap of $25 per thousand valuation rate. And I guess my question is pretty general. What's your perception on a potential resolution for that? And if it can't be resolved, how do you see that impacting your role on the school committee? Because it would happen within the next couple of years.
Yeah, if we get there, Mark, I agree. There's going to be a lot of impact to the budget that is going to come to the services that we were able to restore along the way. I was part of the school committee that restored the health curriculum to the high school. We also restored string music to the elementary schools. And those were some of the things along the ways that we had lost because we didn't get an override, a very contentious vote in the past. Along the way, we did get another override. So hard decisions will have to be made if we start bumping up against that levy. Now, I'm hoping that we as a town can come together and try and find some solutions that really aren't just the purview of the school committee, but as the arbiter of the majority of the budget for the town. I think we have to be very watchful on what services we're providing and be mindful of what might be impacted should that come to fruition. Now, do we have things that we can do? Yeah, I mean, we've got the water tower property. Can we use that for senior housing? Can we start looking at building turf fields to rent out to other towns? There's a whole myriad of things and I know there's a committee to try and study what we're able to do and to avoid that. So I'm hoping we as a town of pretty intelligent people can find ways to avoid bumping up that cap so we don't have to affect the services that not just the schools, but the whole entire town expects. I mean, we're talking garbage, we're talking senior center, we're talking all the other things, the most vulnerable, aspects of our town would be affected by that happening.
Thank you.
Good evening. What did you take away from your original experience as a school committee member that you feel could help you serve on the current committee?
Yeah, that's a great question because, everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, everybody sees this as a political seat, right? And you're going into politics and it's like minor politics. And you have these conversations with your family and friends about, the teachers need to be assessed better or, the schools just spend too much money. And really, when you peel back the onion and you're sitting there with the administration next to you, the select board in front of you, the school committee sitting there, and then the cabinet all around, it's just a team of friends and family working together towards the same goal for the most part. So, you come in, people have their own personal political views about what being on the school committee is, but once you really get there, you just realize it's people who are working hard behind the scenes, teachers who love doing their job, administrators who are very competent and able to do wondrous works for the town, and you lose that edge that you come in, like that political edge, and all of a sudden it's just like, wow, we're just rolling up our sleeves and getting stuff done. And I think that's the biggest thing I took away.
Thank you.
Describe your view of the roles of the school committee and the superintendent, and what is the ideal relationship between the two?
So, by statute, the school committee should be doing very few things. Policy, budget, supervising the superintendent. It's by law, it's a pretty easy description of what that role should be. Of course, it's nuanced, and, policy gets into different things that can affect all of that. But really, when those three things are focused on, the relationship with the superintendent seemed to just flow. If you let the operational experts do what they're tasked to do and take care of the schools do a phenomenal job, and they're flourishing. I still consider today that I have two very good friends in Jan Hart and Marie Doyle, both previous superintendents. I can still get Christmas cards from both of them, and I still talk to them, several times a year. So I think I've been able to be collegial, and if you'll ever talk to Jan, who was before Marie, she'll tell you, I was tough on her. I asked her a lot of deep questions. I did my research. I did my homework. I did not just show up, get my packet, and decide that was what was going to be for the day. And she appreciated that. So you need to be hard in asking the questions, affirming the actions, but relying upon those experts to really do the job that they were hired to do.
Ryan?
Thank you. Aaron, how will you know when a program or decision has been successful?
I mean, basically, you have to baseline whatever you're trying to change or trying to affect, and then you really have to measure it after the time. I would start with, that baseline of what is the operational definition of what we're trying to measure, and then look at the effect over time, and then, go back and see if something's working. See, a lot of organizations, especially with organizational change, as rapid as it is now, start something and give it 3 months and decide it's not working. Start something, give it 6 months and it's not working. You really have to determine a time frame up front as well to see if the effect of that change is happening in the time frame which you're looking at.
Thank you.
Marie?
You've been through several budget cycles. What do you feel there could be some reforms in either the budget that you're looking for or else a budget process?
I think the budget process, just outside looking in, I still look at the budget every year. I still, ask questions through email to both Paul and to Tom. I think I've seen a very good mesh on the town where both Marty and Stephen work very well together that I can see. Which has a downward effect of Tom and Paul working very well together, and they always have. And I think that the budget process has gotten a lot better since the time that I served on the board because of that cooperation. And I think that's kudos to the two leaders for doing that.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Is there anything on the district improvement plan that you are particularly interested in or would, work to really support or change in general?
For me and my service, at this point, I'm really concerned as Mark was saying about our running up against the cap, what we can do to avoid that and how to participate. So my expertise is in finance and budget, so I would hope to bring that more to bear than trying to affect any other thing more than that.
Can I follow up with that? Is there anything on the student learning in that district improvement plan you're particularly interested in, or?
Again, I'm not an educational expert, so I rely upon the assistant superintendent to guide us along in that process. And as they make recommendations, to do my research into what those recommendations are and to see whether those will improve student learning or not.
Richard?
Yes, as you know, we have an SOI in for the middle schools. And I'm modifying my original question just a little bit. What's your thoughts on if the SOI is disapproved? What are we going to do in the next 5 years?
So if the SOI is disapproved, that's a good one. I still don't think it's fully been thought out what the financial ramifications are to the district of the SOIs. So we have the issue of busing if we go with one school, depending on where we place that. I have a child at Glenbrook. I mean, it's in relatively good shape. Cole Allen's done a great job over there with the maintenance staff. And, Williams, he seems to be aging a little bit more. So I think at some point, we decided to stop putting Band-Aids on Williams because we didn't want to put more bad money into a bad building with the hopes that we'll get an SOI, and then we're going to have to make a decision about what does that mean for our community. So at some point, Richard, I think we would have to start putting on those Band-Aids over at Williams to bring it up to what we would need it to be to be conducive to learning for our children.
Follow up?
Sure.
If you're put on the board this year, and we've got a 5-year window, what would be your immediate plans to bring correction about? Would you have intentions to run a parallel program against the SOI now instead of letting an emergency slap us in the face?
I don't think you can let it get any worse at this point if you're saying it's over a 5-year window. There are definitely capital projects that along the years we have not put forth or thought about doing, boilers, air conditioning, roof, windows, all those different types of things, lockers, and really start thinking hard about what that would mean for the district budget-wise to let it get any worse, especially given the fact that we want to make sure we're maintaining a environment conducive to learning for the children.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Melanie?
So you mentioned 2 previous superintendents, Hart and Doyle. Were you involved in your capacity as school committee member, were you involved with the hiring or the evaluation of the prior superintendent, prior to Dr. O'Shea?
No. Oh, you mean Marie Doyle? Yes, she was. We hired Marie Doyle on the school committee I was on. Yes.
And were you there for evaluation as well?
I was as well. Yes.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, well, I see how you just recently spoke about the middle schools. So the same 5 categories, one would be to rebuild both schools, repair both schools, have one new middle school, have a new middle school that actually houses 2 different schools in it, and then the other would be a K-8 program. Do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. I have a preference on what makes the most sense for the best learning environment for our students up against what is the best financial plan for the community. As I was, starting into the answer when Richard asked the other question about, what happened if it didn't get approved. If we were to go to one building, my concern would be that because Glenbrook is not in as bad a shape, personal feeling, that the state may come and say they're not going to give us any reimbursement for the replacement of that building. So then this project could potentially be more money right now based upon the cost of steel and everything else than the high school project was. So if you're going to build, and depending on the spot you're putting on it, you bring in, you're bringing in busing costs, which we don't have today, any busing costs. And if you got 48% reimbursement from the state, because at a town like Long Meadow, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt that they give us 48%. If they did not reimburse us for Glenbrook, you could potentially be looking at 24% reimbursement on a $100 million building. That's just the reality of dealing with the state on the reimbursement process. And so at that point, could we afford to do one new building on a bond that could be bigger than the bond that was there for the high school? So would we have to look at renovation as a cheaper option when maintaining two schools? I think there's a lot more that has to go into the number grinding than we have today to make that decision.
Thank you. Thanks. Karen?
So Thank you again for putting in your application, and I just want to say that I appreciate your service in the past to the town and your involvement with the town. It feels funny to ask the same question again, but I do think it's important that you understand your colleagues that you'll be working with, the goals of the team, how you work together with the team, whether you're aligned. So with that in mind, do you know or are you familiar with the goals of the current school committee? And do your goals align with that of the current school committee?
I think the goal of everybody here is to have the best school system guided by the best administration possible. So in that point, I think everybody's thoughts align. Now, when I served, I can tell you, we had the most diverse board that you could ever want to have. We had Mary Vogel, who was as diametrically opposed to myself and a couple colleagues, and John Fitzgerald, who I call a great friend, but we have nothing almost in common when we're talking about our viewpoints and our opinions on issues. But we were always able to work together to build consensus. And a lot of that was through talking together, being transparent, and making sure we had the facts in front of us to come to that conclusion together. So I have no misgivings that, we all have differences of opinions on topics and how to get there. But in the end, I definitely think we're all working towards that same thing, which is the best school system that we can for our children.
Yes, I have a question that might have a couple of questions within it, so if you need me to repeat anything, feel free to ask. What is your view on the use of personal social media accounts for school committee members? And I ask you this because you've previously posted your personal opinions of current sitting school committee members on social media. Where do you draw the line in representing your opinion as a private citizen versus your professional opinion as a school committee member? And how do you reconcile your very personal comments earlier this year with your earlier statement tonight that we can all come together at the end of the day because it's not personal?
I would say that I don't believe that anybody sitting on the school committee or select board would or should use social media in an official capacity to express their opinion about the business of the school committee. I can assure you that my Facebook activity has maybe 5 friends on it, and I don't use social media as a normal course of business. I don't think this is in conflict with me as a private citizen stating earlier in the year that I thought that the agenda posting for specific agenda matters was done improperly based upon my experience as a school committee member. And, like I said, going forward, if I was to be appointed, I would not be using social media to discuss to anybody. In fact, like I said, I have 5 friends on Facebook. 3 of them don't even live in town, I think. So it'd be kind of hard for anybody to get a hold of me on any kind of social media.
Thank you.
So, Armin, lots of times you get I'll call it, I guess, a second crack at the wheel here. Looking back, what do you wish you were able to do on the school committee that if you got on this now that you'd really try to target to accomplish or get done?
Mark, I think for me, the biggest thing I wish we had accomplished would have been getting the athletic fields in place in town to alleviate some of the pressure on the fields, on DPW, on a bunch of the sports in town that aren't able to be as effective as some other towns because of the lack of permanent space.
Thank you. Okay. Ronald?
What do you think is the most critical issue facing our schools?
I think Mr. Gould brought it up earlier, is us bumping up against the $25 limit, because if we do, we're not going to be looking at maybe cuts, we're going to be looking at yes cuts, and it's not something we want to put our children in the way of.
Bill?
I'm good.
Okay. Ryan?
Yes. What, knowing as you do the role we have here in evaluating the superintendent, what are the characteristics that you would look for in a superintendent?
I think I'm looking for one who inspires. One who you see has confidence by the staff. One who gets consistent feedback from the community and staff and administration. That they are so glad to go to work every day because of the leadership that they have, and that's what I hear from the community, from the staff, from administration, who I still very friendly with numerous people throughout the district, and so from that perspective, when you get that kind of feedback, you can't just feel but good things about that feedback.
Marie?
I have a second question. Coding. What do you think about the situation of availability of coding in the schools right now?
I was reading with great interest. My wife is has worked at a methadone clinic in the past. She's a clinical psychologist, and we discuss this kind of issue on a deep basis. I think the need has been shown. The chief demonstrated the need as well with the SRO.
No, I mean coding for computers.
Oh, coding.
Computing
I thought you said
classes.
codeine. I'm like, okay. Okay. Oh, did you think codeine or coding?
No, I was thinking, where are you going? Well, I knew exactly where you were going, but I
I'll
wasn't
leave
going to
one.
interrupt. I'm
Okay.
thinking
Coding classes.
Thank you. Coding classes. Oh,
I
definitely.
hear
Oh,
about
yeah.
this from parents.
Oh yeah, I mean, we can't, be going into where we are right now without. I mean, I have friends who have dropped out of the business world, gone to the coding boot camps in New York City and Chicago, and then 6 weeks later they're out with great jobs, $70,000, $80,000 jobs off of a 6-week course, or shorter, where they're just going to these coding boot camps. They're up 24 hours a day on coffee and Red Bull. And coming out with the skills they need to thrive in this atmosphere we have. So yes, for that, we definitely need to. And I know that we've done some great work on getting kids introduced to coding. I know my 10-year-old came home last year with the assignments from Mrs. Giugio, and my older one in the middle school, the same at their technology. But yeah, to take it forward to the skills that we need for today. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Stephanie?
Is there, or what major learning initiative would you be interested in particularly supporting or following, or is there one that you're particularly interested in?
Again, I mean, the question goes back to my answer earlier. Whatever particular interest the administration has at that time, I think it's the job of the school committee to do their research and to give the support or to ask hard questions about what that initiative may be. I'm not a learning professional, so once again, I rely on learning professionals to tell me what is important to them in that area.
Just like to follow that up. We currently have a district improvement plan that goes through 2020. It's a reflection, our superintendent sent out an email of existing school improvement plans, school committee goals, and DESE standards for district effectiveness. There are 3 goals that are specifically related to student learning. And this is part of our role as a school committee member. So is there anything that you want to say about anything with that district improvement plan, or anything student learning? I hear about budget, but I'm just wondering what your take is on your role in the student learning.
I don't know how to
aspect.
repackage that answer to say that, again, I'm not an educational professional. I'm a committed member of the Long Meadow Public who wants to give his time, hopefully in a positive, impactful manner. Once again, I would be leaning upon the educational professionals and what they bring forward as their plan to to guide me and as a policy person to affect the policy that supports their goals in helping our children achieve their best.
Richard?
I have nothing more.
Thank you. Melanie?
So, you mentioned that you believe that people act in the best interest for Long Meadow, and that people are working hard behind the scenes and rolling up their sleeves and getting the job done. That's what you had said. What is your viewpoint on, well, let me just phrase it this way. Do you feel the same way about the school committee last year, of which 4 are the same committee members? Do you feel that they shared in that same goal when they were going through the very difficult personnel matter that they were tasked with?
I think that each school committee that is constituted brings a different approach to how they operate. As far as last year, I do believe that everybody would work in their best interest. That doesn't mean that the public shouldn't question or ask hard questions of our elected officials. I can tell you there was many times during my tenure that hard questions were asked. Redistricting, the time we got 0% increases from the teachers on a contract. Some of those were some of the toughest negotiations, and we were questioned hard, and in the end, I was still friends with people. It wasn't personal.
If I could follow up, so do you have an appreciation then for the fact that there are conflict of interest rules and confidentiality rules that keep or do not allow the public to be privy of certain information?
I believe that when the law is clear on how an agenda should be posted, that if it isn't followed 100%, that opens up a door to the public that should be allowed to be seen. That's my personal feeling. And yes, I do know that there are many things we can't talk about confidentially, and especially personnel matters. But when there was ambiguity as to whether it was a personnel matter for discussion of character as it is described in the state law in regards to how agenda should be posted, or whether it was a personnel matter, brings up the question of transparency, and that was the question that I raised. And I would do it again.
But do you believe but the motivations you believe were to do it was in the best interest of?
At the time, I believed that the school committee thought it was in the best interest, but then the same information that was being requested was released during the evaluation of the superintendent, so I would question whether it was still there at the end.
Thank you. I think I asked
Just-
3 or asked for clarifications. I
Fine.
apologize if I asked 3.
That's right, Tom?
Yeah, Armin, so you're working in the insurance field, and is there a skill set from that field that you think would be most useful for this position and maybe give you an advantage over other applicants?
Tom, I work in sales. I direct the sales force. I'm responsible for a team across the country, and the budget for that, and the planning, the strategy. It's all stuff I do on a day-to-day basis, and I think that's what I bring is getting involved immediately in the budget and policy, and then using those skills that I have learned from 20 years of being in the financial services industry to affect a positive impact on the committee.
Thank you.
Karen?
So you briefly talked about in the beginning the time commitment, and I think when I decided to run, I think you were one of the first people that told me what a huge time commitment it is.
Did I lie?
No, you for sure did not lie. I think you maybe under-exaggerated. So my question for you is if you could delve a little bit more into what has changed with your current position that you feel you would be able to make the time commitment and sit on task force and subcommittees and, budget season and what it takes
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a different time. Like I said, we had just purchased another company. I was on the integration team. I had led a larger team at the time, which was being integrated into another team. So basically, that took away whatever time I had for the school committee at the time. And I, as I cried giving my farewell speech, and it was that emotional. I wanted to continue to serve. I just didn't have that time. Now there's no integration going on. I work remotely now from my house, so I'm in town all the time. And I have direct reports across the country who are regionally located such that I don't have to get on a plane and go to California tomorrow, unless I was told to, but it doesn't happen, very often. So I can make the time for this commitment. And I know what the time takes for this commitment. I know you all put in at least that 20 hours a week reviewing stuff, talking to people, doing the research. It's not as easy as people think.
And then just a follow-up, if I could. Do you envision yourself running in the next election in June?
My intent would be to serve again, yes. If that were to come up. I mean, again, of course, you always have family situations come up or whatever else. My daughter will be going to college next June, so it'll be. But yes, that would be the plan.
Yeah.
I have one last question. I believe here in Long Meadow, we are well on our way to establishing a strong leadership team here among the superintendent, committee members, and administrative staff. How do you best describe your personality and your leadership style?
I challenge my team on a daily basis to take ownership of their franchise. That's my management style, is to give my team what they need from me to be successful. And so I think, in working with the school committee and the members of the administration, is to be supportive, to give them what they need to be successful for our children and for ultimately our town. Because once again, with the overwhelming majority of the budget coming from the schools, that's really important.
Thank you.
I have no further questions, Bronwyn?
No, thank you.
No? Bill? No. Okay. Ryan?
Nope.
Okay. Marie?
No.
Stephanie?
I just want to get back to the learning. Student learning for me is really important as a school committee member. A lot of our decisions are based on the district improvement plan and input that we do get from teachers and staff. And one issue that is on the radar a lot is the student achievement gap. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that? That's one area that we've addressed in our budget, and how would you go about making those decisions to, when it comes to budgetary decisions that impact student learning? Do you have a priority, and is the achievement gap on your radar?
I think everything that affects the budget would be on the radar. From a how would I go about doing it? I mean, we have experience in the past of this very similar items. We had cohorts of special education, specifically over at Wolf Swamp. We created teams to implement changes there. And I think this goes to what Ryan was asking earlier about, how do you start something and then measure the success. Was we would start something, we wouldn't really base on it very well, and then all of a sudden you would come back to it 3 months later and this isn't working. So it's really working with the administrative staff, again, to the educational experts to set that baseline, to allocate the proper resources to get it done. And we've done it in many ways. Reading intervention, we've done it in in math intervention. We started off doing investigation math, and then we switched to the Pearson math. And so as a school committee member, you're going to have all kinds of different learning programs, interventions coming at you. And I think it goes back to relying upon your administrative staff to help guide you to what they think is the most appropriate peer-based research at that time to affect change within our student body. How do you prioritize the budget on that? Again, it's relying upon the superintendent and his direct reports to discuss your options with you. What do we have enough money for? What is the most effective way to get there? And then rely upon that. Tough decisions are going to be made along the way. And, we're going to have to do that. I can say that, from an educational gap perspective, I've seen a lot more differentiated education in the classroom over the last 4 or 5 years than I have in the past, which has made me feel really good about the job our teachers are doing. We have the best teachers anywhere, no doubt about it. I think somebody asked the question about, gifted programs versus, we have such a great staff who addresses the challenges of the gifted child by pushing extra work their way or pushing them to resources that maybe don't cost much, but have a great impact on that child. And I'll give an example. We lost a phenomenal teacher, and she left because she had a great opportunity, young, but Miss Manna over at 5th grade over at Center School. She took my daughter aside, gave her reading lists, great books, gave her math resources, everything. And so it's not just specific programs, but it's empowering our teachers to recognize that greatness in our children and allow them to affect that kind of change, which may not cost all that much.
Can I follow up? When you say cohort of special ed at Wolf Swamp, can I ask what you're referring to there?
Yeah, when we were looking at the MCAS scores, basically we were continually getting one cohort of special education at children at Wolf Swamp who were not scoring within the expected parameters at the time. And so Jan Hart at the time had put in a plan to try and to address those issues.
Thanks. Mr. Foster?
No, I have no.
No questions? Melanie?
Okay, so you have talked about what you feel your role would be as a school committee member, and you're also in the business world. So how do you see the roles of a board of directors in a private entity or corporation? How does that alike or different from the role of a school committee member? Any examples?
Yeah, I would say, and I think that's one of the things that was very eye-opening around the first time is you think you're going to run a public entity like you run a business, and you don't. I mean, in the end, you can't. It's a totally different construct. The whole education system in itself doesn't lend itself to running like a business. And one of the things I learned in the end is you don't want to. The educational professionals know what they're doing in this town. And for me, I rely upon that to help guide and make the best decisions for it. So, board of directors is more of the board talks and you do, as opposed to the school committee should be more of a collaborative process with both town manager and the superintendent.
Tom?
I'm also.
Okay, and Karen?
I'm all set, thank you.
And just going to just ask her again through the list. There were a few people who had questions. Does anybody have any additional questions for Mr. Ray? No? Thank you very much for coming.
Appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Repeat again that next Tuesday, the 4th, we will be voting for an appointment. So I'd like to call up Heather Goldstein. At this point, you probably know the drill, so we've got up to 3 minutes to give any comments you may have. Please, go ahead.
I typed up a statement. I'm not used to, used to talking to third graders all day long, so it's a little intimidating. Good evening. My name is Heather Goldstein, and I am virtually a lifelong resident of Longmeadow, as my parents built their house in town when I was 3 years old. I am proud to say I attended Blueberry Hill, Williams, and of course the high school here in Longmeadow. As a result of the great childhood and education I received here in Longmeadow, I knew this is where I wanted to raise my family. In 2011, my husband and I bought our first home on Burbank Road and subsequently moved to Pinewood Drive a year ago as we needed more space for our now family of 4. Our oldest son, Mason, is a first grader at Blueberry Hill, and my 3-year-old son, Gavin, attends the JCC. My father served on the Longmeadow School Committee for 9 years, from the time I was in 4th grade until my senior year, where I had the privilege of having him award me my high school diploma. I've seen firsthand the sacrifices school committee members make and the time spent away from families. However, I always admired my father for his work ethic and how even after a long day at his day job, it was important for him to show my 3 younger siblings and I the importance of public service and a genuine desire to make our community and schools the best they could be. As a parent, I've always been involved in my children's education. For the past 4 years, I've been chairing the Early Learning Center's PTO at the JCC. In addition, I recently completed a 3-year term on the board of directors at the JCC, as well as a security subcommittee that was put into place after a series of national bomb threats at various JCCs. As a working parent, it is difficult to volunteer during the school day. So once the opportunity arose itself to join the Blueberry Hill School Council, I knew I wanted to be involved. The same happened when the vacancy was announced on the Longmeadow School Committee. I realized it was my opportunity to give back to the community that gave me so much and shaped me to be the person I am today. Not only have my personal experiences prepared me to work collaboratively with board members and to view the bigger picture, but my professional experiences have as well. This will be my 15th year as an elementary educator. My first 2 years teaching, I taught first grade in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, then have been in Suffield ever since, where I taught first grade for 11 years, and then decided I was ready for a new challenge and requested to switch to 3rd grade. I am starting my 2nd year at that grade level. As you can see on my resume, I have been involved in many initiatives, committees, and feel that I am a leader within my district when it comes to responsive classroom and social emotional learning. I believe in putting the child first and educating the entire child, and that is evident in the commitment I bring not only to the academic side of teaching, but in how I forge strong relationships with my students and their families. I am familiar with the workshop model, the Lucy Calkins units of study for both reading and writing, foundations, second step, lively letters, responsive classroom, response to intervention, the benchmark assessment system, guided reading, Rubicon Atlas, WIN blocks, standards-based report cards, and the Common Core. Most recently, I've been a member of the district and school-level technology team, the Teacher of the Year committee, the Behavior Student Intervention team, and the Social Skills team. Over the summer, I attended a 4-day advanced responsive classroom workshop, a 1-day responsive classroom Power of Our Words workshop, a 1-day PLC leadership workshop entitled Getting Started with DataWise, a framework for data-driven collaboration. I spent 11 days writing curriculum for math, writing, and social emotional learning. I also served as a building representative for the Suffield Education Association for 2 years. During that term, I represented our pre-K2 school and negotiated our most recent contract. I am also one of the 2 K5 representatives who will be negotiating our next contract, which officially begins early this September. I believe my experience as an elementary educator would be an invaluable addition to the school committee, and the perspective I can bring to the committee will be unparalleled. In closing, I believe that I can bring the unique viewpoint of being a town native, an elementary educator, and most importantly, a parent of 2 young children who are just beginning to embark on their journey in Longmeadow Public Schools. It is my hope that you can see my genuine love for education, this town, and for children. I want to show my children that one person can make a difference, that taking risks helps us to grow, and that it is important to give back to their community.
Thank you, Heather. Before I ask my question, I'm going to switch it up a little bit, but I really wanted to applaud your father's commitment to setting an example for his kids on civic engagement. It's so important. I see that you're carrying that forward with your kids, and that's really commendable. I think that's valuable. My question for you, specifically is, given the amount of time you've lived here in Long Meadow and your extensive career as an educator, what do you see as the Long Meadow Public School System's greatest strengths and greatest deficits?
The greatest strengths, I see just the commitment that we have to the children in the community, to our education, to our teachers, to, we're all a team. We all have the child, the whole child as our goal, and supporting the whole child. I believe that we really, when needed, we come together as a community. I've seen that over time and time again, growing up here. And, that's one of the things that drew me back to this community. My husband's from Long Island. He came here and, to visit when my parents still live in town. We live around the block from them. And, he just fell in love with this community, and you can just feel it. It's just a diamond in the rough. And I'm so proud to be a part of this community. And I just think that, when push comes to shove, we come together and we all have the child at our center. As far as a weakness, I think that, because Long Meadow has such a fantastic reputation, there's pressures that go along with that reputation for children. Keeping up to those high standards for families, I think, can be a weakness and a challenge, and, those pressures.
Thank you.
Heather, acknowledging that most of the costs of running our schools are associated with people costs, which is salaries, what would you try to do as a member of the school committee to keep the rate of growth of our school budget within the limits of Prop 2.5?
So, I am definitely more of an expert on the education side, and I definitely need to learn a lot more and educate myself about the budget perspective. But I do understand that the salary increase is a huge part of our budget. I see that in my district as well. And so I'm very familiar with that piece. And I think that we would just have to get really creative and build our capacity here with our educators, and, use the teachers that we have in district who are really strong in areas to maybe do in-house professional development, and just kind of get really creative with the way that, with all of our costs.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. If you had to set one specific goal for the Long Meadow School Committee to accomplish this year, what would it be?
Well, I definitely agree with Armand, and, we have to look at the budget and, working with that budget. But when thinking about the children, which is always my focus, is the social emotional learning would be something that I would really want to dive into.
Bill?
Describe your view of the roles of the school committee and the superintendent. What is the ideal relationship between the two?
I think the ideal relationship is that it's a partnership. I think that everybody brings something different to the table, and that, every member of the school committee has different background, and, brings those strengths to the partnership. And just with, same thing with Dr. O'Shea. He brings that educational piece to the committee that some members might not have, and that, he sees the bigger picture. And, but I think it's a partnership.
Ryan?
Thank you. What businesses or community groups do you think would be beneficial for our school district to collaborate with?
Well, businesses. I think that growing up in town, I do know a lot of people, and a lot of people come back to town and are here. And so, definitely using those resources, and, and being in education myself, there's a lot of different organizations or, things that we've done through our PTO, and, that I could bring back, and as being a part of, being involved at the JCC is another organization, and the school council, at Blueberry Hill. So I feel like, at different phases and stages of my children's lives, even though they haven't been alive that long, my oldest is 6, there's definitely people that I've met, and connections that I've made between my children growing up in town and my professional life.
Thank you. Marie?
You mentioned you don't have much experience with the budget, but do you have experience with having to deal with actual cuts that have occurred and the tough decisions that are often made when you have a tight budget in front of you?
With being a teacher for the past, this will be my 15th year, you know, I have experienced and lived, you know, my first 2 years in Stafford Springs, I was low man on the totem pole and, you know, did get a pink slip both of those years and then was hired back, you know, and which is why then I took the opportunity for a 1-year contract to go to Suffield, which then became permanent. Because I was looking, you know, to have a little bit more of a job security. But so I have experience, and even, you know, obviously with working in Suffield, you know, we've had tight budgets, we've had to, you know, cut positions, we've had to cut para positions, you know, and we've been really fortunate, you know, and I hope that we could be here too to get very creative in not having to lose people and figuring out other ways to, you know, look into getting more money.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
I heard you talk about social emotional learning and something that you would want to delve deeper into, and that's part of our district improvement plan includes social emotional learning. So can you speak a little bit about that, what you'd like to see happen here or changes or?
Right. You know, well, I listened to Oliver Davis's graduation speech, and I think it really resonated with me because even though I'm an early childhood educator, you know, I have seen the pressures on my first graders, on my third graders. So, you know, I think really recognizing that is important. And I think, you know, as a teacher, it's always been so important to me to just really build that safe community in my classroom where my students feel safe, where they feel like, you know, that we have a connection, that I know my students. And I think having that motto of really knowing your students, connecting with them, would help to build that bridge, like, for the social emotional learning. And then I think, you know, using responsive classroom, you know, really also helps to build that community. I know that the schools use Second Step as part of the social emotional curriculum at the elementary level. And just all of those pieces really help. But I think that all kids benefit from social emotional learning. You know, oftentimes students with IEPs have social skills goals on their IEP, but in my experience, all kids benefit from those lessons, from those goals, and I think that, you know, it's definitely something that should be a priority.
Richard?
Yes, before we tiptoed around a question on vocational education and gifted education. And you're a third grade teacher, so you're at I'm sure you could share with us a lot of stories on what you've identified with your students going through. What do you think? Are we doing it right, or is there room for improvement on gifted and vocational?
I think there's room for improvement with vocational, and as far as gifted, you know, I think that sometimes many parents think their children are gifted, you know, but I think with the Common Core is really asking children to explain their thinking. It's not just asking them to get the right answer. You know, and explaining your thinking is a completely different skill than just getting to the answer. So, you know, I think that when we look at children who are, you know, genuinely gifted, we need to evaluate them. We need to have different assessments, but I think we also need to build our capacity with differentiation and meeting the needs of all learners to the best that we can. And if we can't, you know, go to an evaluation and label that student, you know, gifted, and then provide them the instruction that they deserve.
Okay, how about the vocational aspect?
The vocational aspect, you know, I believe that in meeting the needs of all kids, I think that, you know, kids have different interests. You know, they might not be just interested in math and science and reading, and I think that there's a definite need, you know, for that.
Can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
Do you do anything at your level to try to cultivate or encourage that developmental need in the child? I mean, you're third graders.
Yes.
They're prime.
So we do. So even when I taught first grade, so we had a makerspace where, you know, kids were really able to, like, create, and we have that in third grade also, and, you know, we do. We don't. I mean, that's kind of the piece of it at our level. You know, we try to get them to create, and we try to build their own interests, but we don't offer separate classes and things like that because they're with us for the entire day. You know, we kind of stick to the regular subjects at that level.
Okay.
Thank you, Melanie.
Phil, Heather, did you have any opportunity to watch or come to any school meetings or?
I didn't come to any
Familiarize yourself with
school
him.
board meetings recently. You know, back when full-day kindergarten was a topic, you know, that was something that I was interested in. My district had gone to full-day kindergarten maybe a year or two prior. And because I had children coming up, that was definitely a topic that I was interested in the redistricting. So during those times when there was topics that applied to me, you know, with my children being as young as they were, you know, I tried to watch meetings and follow up. I have been watching meetings and, you know, preparation for today. So, you know, I am familiar with your goals that you set or working on. They're kind of in a draft form, I think, at this point.
Tom?
Yeah, the same question I've had for others, you know, when you look at the options for middle school of, you know, rehabilitating or building two buildings, building one building that could house two schools, or looking at K through 8, do you have a preference?
I think if I could choose one, it would be one school, just because something that I think that is important is building consistency amongst different buildings. So when you have 2 different middle schools or 3 elementary schools, you know, you're bound to have different things happening and bound to have kids having different experiences. So that would be a definite pro for me in having one middle school. A concern would be, you know, in having a K-8 school, you know, with a child that is on that lower end, you know, I would be concerned about, you know, what they might potentially see if they were, you know, if we did bus kids to school and how that would work out, because, you know, you kind of want to keep our young children in a bubble for, you know, as long as we can, and, you know, obviously 8th graders and kindergartners in the hallways and whatnot would be something to think about for me.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting your application in, and I'm very interested in your work with the Safety and Security Subcommittee at the JCC, because this is a paramount issue that we are dealing with in our schools, and, you know, we are working with this right now in the school committee. I mean, this is a nationwide issue, so that is really something that I would love for you to delve a little bit deeper, and just could you describe your work on that? And
Sure. You know, it is a huge issue. You know, as a teacher, you know, we have a lot of responsibility, you know, on our shoulders these days, and, you know, it's changed. In the 15 years that I've been teaching, it's very different. After Newtown is 20 minutes away from Suffield. I was a first grade teacher when that happened. It really hit close to home. And, you know, it was really hard to go back to work. And then, but you know that you have to be strong and, you know, for those kids. So security has been something always on my mind. You know, we're, you know, scared to go to work sometimes, you know, but we have to, and, but anything can happen anywhere. So I know that. And as far as the JCC with the national bomb threats, and we had 2 different threats at our own JCC here. One was a note in the bathroom, and one was a phone call. And so I was the only Early Learning Center parent representative on that subcommittee. We had a security expert come in and kind of toured the building, evaluated, rated everything, you know, from like a high threat, medium threat, a low threat, went, you know, through also like addressing the cost of everything. And then our committee met. We had a lot of meetings also with the parents because of the preschool that is at the JCC. You know, that was kind of the pocket of, you know, the parents were very concerned, even though that's the most secure area of that building, because you have to have a swipe card to get into that area. So he came, you know, he gave us his report. We kind of went through the report, chose what we wanted to do, but also it costs money, you know, to do all of those things. So, you know, we were able to so far start with it. There's a much, I don't know if any of you have been to the JCC recently, but there's a big security desk in the main lobby, which was the first step because we wanted everybody to kind of be visible as they were entering the common part of the JCC. And then there's different phases. You know, we're looking to put in those cement barriers by the picnic grove where the campers go, you know. Unfortunately, people drive into things these days, you know, now. Making things more secure in the classrooms, making sure you could lock the doors, having more drills, Some things that didn't cost anything, and then of course, kind of prioritizing, and, we're still working on funding. That's the hard part now.
Good.
Heather, what role do you think service-based learning should play in our curriculum, if any?
Can you give me an example of service-based learning?
So just in general, combining our instruction with some really meaningful community service projects.
Oh,
K through 12.
Yeah, I'm all for community service. I think that makes things more meaningful, and I think that teaching and learning, I think it needs to be meaningful and real life. So if we can build real life experiences and giving back to the community into our instruction, I think that's a win for everybody.
Thank you.
Heather, I want to just ask a question about time commitment. As you've heard perhaps from the other applicants, that, things happen beside in the evenings. I won't say it's a 24-hour-a-day job, it's not, but there's emails, there's back and forth. And I also recall that at one point we had a classroom teacher from West Springfield who found that he was unable to keep up with the doings of the school committee and resigned shortly after being elected. So my question is, how do you see this time commitment fitting in with your responsibilities as a full-time employee in another school district?
I think that's a great question. Everything that I do, I give 110% of myself. So every committee, my job, my family, I do my best to give 110%. I wouldn't have committed to this, or I wouldn't be here, with spending your time and my time if I didn't feel that it was a commitment that I could make. I'm not on the board of directors anymore at the JCC. That ended at the end of the school year last year, so that, freed up some time. I'm not a building rep anymore. This isn't my first year in a new grade level anymore. There's a lot of, we scaled down the role of the chair of the PTO at the end of last year, so, not everything was falling on my shoulders. So there's a lot of things that have kind of, that I've done, and that's why I didn't put my name in, for the election process, because those things were all still going on, and I wouldn't have been able to, give it 110%. But a lot of those things, I'm not involved in anymore, and so I do feel like I could. And I'm really lucky to have a great support system. My husband's job is very flexible. My parents still live around the corner, so being a mom, of course, is my number one priority, and then, but I would give it everything.
Thank you. Bronwyn?
Can you describe the type of communication you feel should occur with the school committee and the administration?
I think that you can never have enough communication, as far, whether it's from the school committee to the administrators or vice versa, or to the teachers. I think transparency is really important, and I think that, again, we are all here for the kids, so we're a team. We're a team also with the administrators, and I think that the more that we can go with that team approach, the more that we could accomplish.
Bill?
I'm good. All set.
Great. Ryan?
Thank you. If you were at I'm just going to give you a little scenario. So let's say you're at a sporting event in town, and a parent comes up to you to express a complaint about a particular school and a particular person in the school. What would you do with that information?
I would listen. I would kind of evaluate, what their concern was. If it was something, it's serious in nature, I would bring it, directly to the school committee, bring it directly to, Dr. O'Shea, depending on the severity of what they were talking about. If it was something, about something that's happening in their child's classroom, I think that the first chain of command is going to the teacher, and I would, really encourage them to talk to their child's teacher. If they had already tried that, I would just try to help guide them and, kind of the next steps, then maybe going to the building administrator, and kind of explain that I can, I'm here to listen, and, not only be your friend, but give that professional, educator's perspective too, and, which I've done, with friends. I would just kind of try to guide them to the right channel.
Thank you.
Marie?
No further questions, thank you.
Great. Stephanie?
So I had asked this question before, we sometimes have a lot of people come out and sometimes not for a school committee. Was there anything in particular that piqued your interest that kind of brought you out this time around?
It's definitely something that I really was interested in. And you just kind of always wanted to figure out when the time would be right. And, my son is only going into first grade now. So, I really felt like I wanted to really put my efforts now in the public schools. I've really focused a lot of time at the JCC over the past 4 years, and I feel like I'll have the bigger impact here in the community that I, grew up in and love so much. So, that's it just kind of fell in at the right time.
Mr. Foster has passed, and Melanie?
So just looking at your resume, you have been involved in a lot of initiatives, bringing things to the school, a lot of continuing education, professional growth. It seems like you're on the cutting edge of what's going on. You stay apprised of all that. What initiative are you either most proud of or excited about or interested in bringing to Longmeadow that we might be lacking, or an area of concern? Or
Something that I'm the most proud of recently actually just happened. 5 of those 11 days that I spent curriculum writing were for social emotional learning. In Suffield, the schools are divided into a pre-K to 2 building, an intermediate building 3 to 5, and then the middle school and the high school. So we have 1 building for each level. And so I was at the pre-K to 2 building, and at that building we had social skills lessons, but they were only delivered to the kids who had social skills goals on their IEP. So the school psychologist at my new building and a 5th grade teacher, really felt the need that all kids benefited from this social emotional learning. So we spent 5 days and we took our second step and we enhanced it. We used Responsive Classroom. We used Michelle Garcia Winner social thinking and zones of regulation. And we used that to enhance and create a new curriculum for our 3 to 5 classrooms. We also initiated pep rallies to build school connectedness and community. We have never done the one book, one school like they do here in Longmeadow. We're gonna start that. Just, different things. And so we presented the other day at because we went back to school on Thursday, so we had one of our professional development days. My colleagues and I presented, and we got applause after we presented, and they're like, we wish that all professional development was like this. And right in front of my administrators and everybody, and my administrators were just blown away by the buy-in of my colleagues, because sometimes when teachers are faced with something new, it's overwhelming, but just because there's such a need for that social emotional piece, everybody was just so excited to have something and really appreciative of our efforts. And so I think that's definitely something that I could bring here, is just that experience of, I think I hold myself to a high standard in the classroom, and I think that I could bring that standard here.
Tom?
Yeah, in your opening statement, it was very impressive. You talked about a lot of the different teaching, approaches to the primary schools. And so I guess I'm thinking in terms of secondary school and high school, and you went to high school here in town. So when you approach that age group, which wouldn't be your strongest area,
No.
what would you say was your best experience as a student here in high school, and that you would like to see as part of students' experiences today?
I think I had some amazing teachers, that really connected with me, that really knew me. In fact, I don't know if any of you know Donna Grimaldi. She was my 6th grade teacher. We've kept in touch. She volunteered in my classroom in Suffield for a few years. Just kept in touch with teachers, whether it's through Facebook, at this point. Most of them are retired, at this point. But I remember the community. My best friends are from Longmeadow High, hands down, and so I just think, and I didn't play sports growing up, you know, and then I feel like in a community where sports are really important, you know, it didn't affect me. I had great friends, you know, and so I think that that's definitely like my best memory. The thing I'm most proud of are the friendships and the relationships that I've met, and just how close my, you know, the people that I grew up with. Many of them have moved back to raise their families here because they have such great experiences. So I just think that the teachers and my, you know, friends, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Karen?
So I know that you said you have been watching our meetings, and I'm assuming that you know a little bit about the goals of the current school committee and what we've talked about. And so my question to you would be, do these goals align with what you see as your goals for the district?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you have social emotional in there, differentiation, and curriculum instruction. You know, I feel like those pieces are really important. And of course, you know, the budgeting is obviously a definite priority. And communication, I think, is also something that I find really important, even just as a classroom teacher to parents. I think, you know, it's important for us to know what our kids are doing all day, what they're learning. It's important for communication between the faculty and the administrators. You know, there's just communication amongst all stakeholders is so important.
I think I just have one last question. I'm going to go back to one of my original questions because I'm sitting here and listening to you talk about your lifelong friendships and how long you've lived in town. So I'm going to scale it down and kind of jump into the middle so I don't have to repeat the whole question. So you know that we're tasked with making policy and contract decisions that may not always be looked upon favorably by the residents of the town. So how would you handle making these hard decisions that'll benefit the students in the district, but in a small community like Long Meadow may be at odds with other members of our team here on the committee or your friends and neighbors?
Well, like I said before, I think that all members of the committee bring a different perspective, you know, and I think that they're all important. And I think as far as, you know, members of the community, specifically, you know, people that I'm friends with, you know, I think that they would trust me. I think that they know how much I love being a teacher, love being in education, love children, that they would trust, you know, any decision, you know, that I made, and respect the fact that we have we would have a very difficult, it's a very difficult role, and, you know, very difficult decisions. And, you know, I spoke earlier about the impact. We have that larger impact now, and you know, it's something I would take very seriously. And I know, and am confident that, you know, these people that are friends, that, you know, true friends, you know, would respect you and would, you know, respect the fact that, you know, you could respectfully disagree, you know, also. So, and members of the, you know, community as well, I would feel confident in, you know, in any decision, and I would stand, you know, with the board and with any decision that we made.
Thank you.
I have no other questions, Bronwyn.
No, thank you.
No? Bill? You're all set. Ryan?
Nope.
Marie, you're all set. Stephanie?
You spoke a lot about differentiation of curriculum, and it sounds like you may be familiar with our district improvement plan. Can you speak a little bit about how that differentiation has impacted, or you hope for it to impact and lessen that achievement gap in students? And
Yeah. You know, I think that, you know, we need to maybe, I think one thing that we could do to, you know, narrow that achievement gap is to offer professional development on differentiation, you know, because I think that's something that, you know, we throw that term a lot around, but do people really know how to differentiate? And I think that that would be something that we would really need to look at, and I think that I think it's important to hold, you know, everybody accountable, like, for their piece in differentiation, and it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do when you're one person and there's 20 children, you know, and they're reading, you know, from a kindergarten level to a 4th grade level, you know, in your classroom. But I, you know, I know and I'm confident that it can be done. And I think that if there's, you know, any unease about it, that I think that we can, you know, possibly provide professional development, and even that in-house professional development that I was talking about. If we have a teacher that does it really well, you know, we can go in and observe her, and or she can, you know, prepare professional development, or he, to the rest of the faculty. But I do think that meeting the needs of all learners is very important, because we want our kids to be challenged. We don't want them to be bored or turned off from learning. And everybody can be taken to that next level.
Mr. Foster?
Yeah, I had one quick question. Have you ever worked at a school that had gifted education programs into the first, second, third, fourth grade?
We used to in Suffield, and then I'm not exactly sure, to be completely honest, why we got rid of it. It could have been a budgetary piece. And I do know that there have been students who have been evaluated, just as you would, to go to a PPT for a student who was special education, and evaluated them to see if they are truly gifted. And then, but we don't have, I've never worked in a school currently, recently I should say, that has a gifted program. We've had accelerated classes at our middle school and our high school. Recently, they took the accelerated classes away at the middle school. But at our level, K-5, we don't have anything. We had some enrichment, like Expanding Horizons, that was after-school programming, like Makerspace, coding, things like that, but not a specific program. But I'd be open to researching and looking into one.
Melanie?
So you have a lot of experience in the younger grades,
Yes.
and you know what they say, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems.
Yes.
How do you see your skills or experience working with that subgroup or that age group? How you can, transfer your skills and your experiences and so forth into making decisions about high school kids that you may not have any of the same experience?
Right. I think that something that is a strength of mine is that I could empathizing, and I think that I could really try to see the perspective, and try to remember what it was like to be, and I know things have changed, but try to think about what it was like to be a middle school or a high school student, and, I remember that time like it was yesterday, and I remember the good experiences, and those definitely outweighed the bad. But I would, turn to different colleagues, different friends. There's so many resources out there that are at my fingertips, like in working in a school system, as far as, different areas of expertise that I don't know everything, so I would be open to learning and using resources in our own, in Long Meadow, where I work, to learn more about that age group.
Tom?
No, thank you.
Karen?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional questions for Heather? Ms. Goldstein, thank you very much for
Thank you.
Thank you for your
coming
time.
in your time. And again, I'm going to just repeat that on the September 4th, it's going to be a broken record. We will be making an appointment. I'd like to next call up James Ryan. Mr. Ryan, please, you get up to 3 minutes for a statement.
Sounds
Please,
great.
go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is James Ryan. Thank you for having me here and for this incredible opportunity. Simply put, public service and a commitment to strengthening public education has been as much a part of my life as my own friends and family. Whether it was through scouting, the National Leadership and Service Fraternity through which I met my wife, serving as a vice president of an international humanitarian nonprofit, or through the various boards and councils I have had the pleasure of working on, playing an active role in the community it's kind of part of who I am. So when I learned of the vacancy on this committee, I saw an excellent opportunity to continue to serve, one where I could apply my background in education and in public office to help Long Meadow now and in the future. I am proud to have worked on the front lines of advancing public education, helping lead efforts to promote billions of dollars in investment in public schools. In times where budget projections are lean, it's critical to be innovative in not only generating the revenue that we need in order to adequately fund our schools, but also in identifying the means by which operations can be run more efficiently. But I'm even more proud of the results of my work in the classroom. After earning my master's in education with a focus on addressing the needs of our students in our nation's lowest performing districts, I was tapped to serve as one of the founders of the Springfield Honors Academy, which in just 1 year has ushered in new heights in student achievement within the district. We are facilitated by innovation and a vision that has led to growth that sounds stranger than fiction. Our MAP scores saw a 90% growth in mathematics and over 500% growth in reading after just 10 weeks of our intensive and accelerated program. Several of our freshmen took and passed the AP World History exam. A student's Lexile score went from 3 years below grade level to 3 years above, and even more of them attained academic achievement they would have never thought possible. And this was only made possible because we were given the structures and supports needed to be successful. We had a school committee who advocated for us, allowed us to bring on the right staff, and trusted my administration and fellow teachers to do their jobs. After all, the role of a school committee ought to be one of collaborating with administration to develop cohesive direction for the district, and of providing logistical and financial support to administration in carrying out those policies and those programs. While my wife and I have not yet started our family, we plan on having our future children attend Longmeadow schools. And by serving on this committee, I would not only be in a position to provide positive leadership and direction for Longmeadow schools in the short term, but to provide the stewardship needed for continued success for years and generations to come. I'm proud to have the support and endorsement of school site, district, and legislative leaders throughout Western Massachusetts, as well as across the nation. They place their trust in my ability to serve, and it's my hope that you will too. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Beth?
Thank you, James, for applying. I had I guess more of a question, but a clarification on your resume when I looked it over.
Absolutely.
If you could just clarify for me, your resume had included former teacher and former substitute and former tutor, but current co-founder of Springfield Honors Academy, and it looked like it said current AP coordinator and social studies chair.
Correct. That was in specific reference to the school sites themselves. I previously worked at the Springfield Central High School. That's where I went through and did my clinical teaching period. I had worked in the Mount Diablo Unified School District in California, both as a long-term substitute and as an avid tutor. And then once I completed my clinical teaching, had gone into working at the Honors Academy.
Okay, so my direct question was,
Sure.
are you a current classroom teacher, and can you clarify how you co-found an academy within the public school system structure?
Absolutely. So the Honors Academy was established, this is our second year of existence, established by Springfield Public Schools as a means of providing effectively a talented and gifted program for the high school students within Springfield. So when the school was being put together, I of course applied. I thought it would be an excellent opportunity. My principal seemed to agree that I would do a good job, so I am, among other things, I am a classroom teacher. I'm the department chair for history. I also develop the curriculum for the school. We have a great deal of autonomy in terms of how we put that together. And I'm working with, as of right now, my curricular pathway is the only one that has AP courses in it so far. So that's where that comes into play.
Okay, can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Sure.
So I don't want to assume, but as social studies chair and as a classroom teacher, can you specify what courses you teach?
Sure. Right now, I teach several sections of AP United States History. I teach one section of a pre-AP World History, as well as several sections of what's called the World Scholar Seminar. That's a fairly unique to the school, especially within the district. So what it focuses on in the freshman year is identifying the UN 17 Global Sustainable Development Goals, and identifying how those issues manifest in the world, how those issues manifest at the local level, and what our students can ultimately do to help address those issues at the local level. In their sophomore year, they finish up the goals, and they are now I'm laying out the framework for the service learning aspect, where they will be tasked with completing a service project within the Springfield community in order to achieve their particular goal at the local level.
Thank you. Without understanding fully what the Honors Academy did, that was great that you clarified.
It's a whole new thing, and I entirely understand that, so thank you.
Mr. Ryan, my question has to do with in Longmeadow school systems, your familiarity with the Longmeadow school systems and your, I guess, your view of any issues or issues of things that you'd like to bring to the Longmeadow school systems, either from your current role as an educator or just as a position of a of an interested citizen. So the question is, what is it that you see that you'd like to get accomplished through a position on the school committee?
Absolutely. So while my experience has predominantly been in working with Title I districts and working with district turnaround, obviously Longmeadow is not a district in need of the turnaround that I've worked with in the past, but there are some principles that carry over. Working with differentiation, working with the idea that so long as there are any students who are struggling and are not receiving the supports and resources that they need to be successful, and so long as we have students that are not reaching their full potential, those who need acceleration or maybe help by a gifted program, so long as that exists, we've got a job to do, and that would be something that I would emphasize, and it's something that I've worked with on both ends, and so that's something I think would be something that I would bring to the committee and bring to Longmeadow and see what we can do with it.
Thank you. Ron?
Thank you. What attributes are essential for successful school committee members, in your opinion?
Ultimately, the attributes needed, one foremost, is leadership. Regardless of what your position on any board or committee or council is, there are times where you are tasked with leading a subcommittee, you are tasked with accomplishing something that you set out to do, right? So being able to take on that leadership, being able to be an advocate are tremendous attributes that you would need. But ultimately what it comes down to is having an open mind and being able to collaborate meaningfully with the people you work with. I'm thankful to have worked with some fantastic groups of governing boards before, and we've been able to accomplish some pretty fantastic stuff. So, yeah, I mean, those are things that are definitely necessary, and those are things that I believe that I would bring. Thank you.
Bill?
Describe your view of the roles of the school committee and the superintendent. What is the ideal relationship between the two?
Unfortunately, not much more that you guys haven't already heard, but it comes down to having a culture of collaboration, of being able to work together to identify this common goal, these common goals, these common visions, to be able to work with them, to be able to support the administration in the carrying out of these policies and programs. I had the pleasure of meeting with Dr. O'Shea recently, where we were able to talk about where he saw the district going, what sorts of initiatives that he thought would be good for the district, and got to kind of pick his brain. He got to pick mine. So that's something that really needs to be a part of a culture. Whenever you're working with, whether it's cross-agency or within an agency, everybody has a stake in this. Everybody should feel that they are supported. Everyone should feel that they are listened to. And sure, you can disagree on things, but at the end of the day, this isn't so much about us as it is about the students. It's about the students, it's about the schools, it's about the community that we all serve, because, well, they are our future. You know what I mean? So, yeah, to be able to have that relationship, to be able to have those open lines of communication and to work well together are critical.
Thanks. Right.
Thank you. Can you suggest any ways that we could bring real-world learning experiences into our schools?
Absolutely. And that's something that I have been working relatively intensively with the social studies curriculum. So what we focus on are C3, the college career, as well as citizenship and community. So identifying ways to extend the learning, and this is just in social studies, extending the learning beyond the classroom, getting active in the community, writing letters, putting together, organizing some sort of event, some sort of, in some cases, protest. I've had students that were on board with the March for Our Lives that occurred in Springfield. And that kind of work is invaluable, and that's just in social studies. Speaking to VOTEC, real world application, real world work. I previously in the past, I think it was 4 years ago, I was part of an effort to expand vocational technical opportunities in the district I was living in. There was definitely pushback from some community members, but there was a lot of support, especially from those who were working in the trades that felt as if they didn't have the people, they didn't have the interest. So providing expeditionary learning, providing project-based learning, providing opportunities for them to get out into the community. I mean, the opportunities are boundless. Yeah.
Thank you. Marie?
Do you know what your experience is with budgets, and do you understand the way our budget process works?
Yes, I've had the opportunity of sitting in on school committee, school board meetings, spanning the coasts, or of viewing them online. We can get to that later. So I've had an opportunity to kind of meet with that specifically. The academy I work at as of right now is not on per pupil funding, so we have to effectively work with what we've got. Whether that, it's cooperative and collaborative effort, not just at the school site, but it extends to everywhere. I've been on, whether I was on the Contra Costa Center Municipal Advisory Council or on the county's Alcohol and Other Drugs Advisory Board, we deal with budgets, and we have to recognize that sometimes making the ends meet is difficult. So, again, you have to be innovative, you have to be creative, you have to find ways that revenue can possibly be generated, finding ways where costs can be cut in a manner that drives efficiency, not, I hate to say it this way, it doesn't cause pain to the things that we hold to be most important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know Beth asked this, but I want to ask her some more clarification. So on this, it says that you co-founded the school that you currently work at, which, am I correct, is it a magnet school in Springfield?
No,
or
it's
is it?
it's through the empowerment zone. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah.
But part of the Springfield school. So what does that mean that you founded it, and what did that look like, and what did that entail?
Yeah. So I was actually, at least according to my principal, I was the first hire for the academy. So she had gone through and had identified the highest quality staff. At least I hope she had the highest quality staff that she could find. I'm always going to be self-deprecating, so I would say get used to that. But she had brought on people who she felt could provide direction to a particular department or to a particular opportunity. Not just, for me, it wasn't just the social studies department. She was looking at building out this World Scholar Seminar, looking at building out a service learning opportunity, about creating the frameworks, both culturally and academically, that the school was going to actualize down the line. And so that's what founding it has been like. It's certainly been a whirlwind of adventure. I've been enjoying it. And I hope that answers your question. Otherwise, feel free to follow up.
Oh. So you were the first hire in
Yes.
the school that was established by Springfield?
Yes.
Okay.
So when we talk about it, we would refer to it as founding staff. So the various things that I put into place, all these different programs and opportunities that we offer at the academy have been, been a strong part of my creation. So,
Who,
yes.
you have it down as co-founder? Who was the other founder?
We had a founding staff. So we're looking at, we have the administration, and then we also have the staff who were brought on with the express purpose of creating that pillar of the school.
Richard?
Yes. I don't need to ask you the gifted education. You've heard you talk quite a bit about that,
Sure.
the vocational aspects of it.
Absolutely.
We have an SOIN, as you've heard many people ask tonight. And what I'm really interested in is that it's not so much what your preference is, but say if it's going to be 5 to 7 years before this SOI is approved at the state, and we don't know when it'll be approved.
Of course.
I'd like to know, what is your thought process from here to that 7-year period?
So I've also seen this occur in California. We had 2 schools that had been proposed for a while to merge, Glenbrook in there and El Dorado Middle School. So they'd come together, and the planning process, despite it coming off as intensive as it was, when the 2 schools did merge, there were certainly shortfalls. There were aspects that had not been anticipated. So my thought process that when it's coming down to having enough time to lay out what the different steps in the process are going to be, regardless of what it is, it has to be one that it makes sense not only now, not only in 2 years, 5 years, etc. It's going to require some creativity. It's going to require some understanding that there are certain needs that need to be addressed in the short term. How do we meet those needs? There are going to be needs that are going to need to be addressed once, if they are brought together, if there's one school, if there's a K through 8, or regardless of what the situation is. It needs to be done right, because I've seen it done fairly wrong.
Follow up, please.
Sure.
What I'm looking for is your viewpoints on, we may never get this SOI approved. And we have 2 aging schools, one open classroom, the other one's closed classroom, it's older. I'm more concerned on what is your thought process for the next, even if it's 15 years, what should we be doing now? Should we have a task force studying this right now? Should the school committee be deeply involved in the condition assessment at these facilities? We've got some engineering studies.
Exactly.
We're sitting waiting for the SOI to be approved. My fear is we're going to wait and wait and wait, and we got another 5 years goes by, and then we may have some major problems out there.
Of course, of course. And so with references to task force and with references to studies, they need to be done intentionally, and they need to be actionable, and they need to be something that we look at, because, again, in the event that the SOI does not go through, action will need to be taken. So if we're looking at whatever those task forces recommend, I'm one to defer to expertise. I'm one to hear as many options as I possibly can. Again, you're asking a question with information. You're asking a question that would be contingent upon the findings of studies and reports, some that have been commissioned, some that may not yet be released or commissioned yet. I would end up listening to them.
Okay. Thank you.
So you've been in town for a year, and I won't presume that you moved from California just this year?
No, I've been
here.
living in Springfield.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So we've often heard that we live in a bubble in Long Meadow. So being here in Long Meadow for just a year, what can you bring as an outsider? You know, that some, you know, a longtime resident might not have
Absolutely.
insight on.
And I've long been an advocate of bringing, fresh ideas anywhere. I think that's something that needs to be a constant part of not just a community life, but a governmental life. So I would say that my experiences in Title I districts, my experiences in turnaround districts, my experiences not just from an educational standpoint, but perhaps a community standpoint. You're saying Long Meadow is living in a bubble. It's not a bad bubble to live in. But it's important to make sure that not only the members of the board, but also our faculty, our staff, our students are being culturally responsive, are understanding that there's a great big wide world out there to explore and to understand and to interact with. Even in Springfield, we this year I've been reaching out and working with SOLA. It's the School of Leadership Afghanistan. It's an all-girls school that exists in a nation that a lot of leadership and a lot of people, especially within the community, are not okay with a woman receiving an education. So opening up opportunities for students, opening up opportunities in professional development for being culturally responsive and just bringing in ideas and looking at what I've seen in California, what I've seen in Springfield. My hope and my intent is that would be invaluable. Thank you.
Tom?
Okay, well, being married with no children, it assures me that you are going to have time for this board appointment, which
You
is
have no
good.
idea.
So that's nice. And you've given some answers regarding the middle schools. It led me to think that you don't have a definite opinion, you'd be open-minded. But, do you have any opinions about that, when we look at our town and we have these two schools and the different options, rebuilding or building two schools, building one school, splitting it between having two schools in one building, or K through 8. Is there any information about that you've thought of, that you've pondered?
There has, and what it comes down to, again, comes from experience, and just as I had spoken here, was of bringing outside perspectives. I've not only seen districts and areas where two middle schools have merged, I've seen and worked in, admittedly, as a summer camp program of a school that was beyond K through 8. They provided childcare services as well. So if you're talking about having an environment where we have all these different age groups coexisting within the same educational space, and looking at one school and having multiple schools within school. The Honors Academy is the 3rd floor of the High School of Commerce in Springfield. The 2nd floor is the Pathways at Commerce, and then the remainder of the building is High School of Commerce proper. So I can say I've been in and experienced effectively all of the above, and the biggest reason why I'm reticent to pass a verdict or an opinion right now is because there's obviously information that once I've had better looks at studies, once I've had better looks at weighing all possible policy alternatives, that I'll be able to give you a more definitive answer. But I think that it would be irresponsible of me to render judgment exactly at this moment. So my apologies if that's not the most satisfying answer to everybody, but it's what
I
I've
was
got.
expecting. Thank you.
It's all I've got, so thank you.
So I'm not sure how long you've been living in the area or how familiar you are with what's actually going on within the schools in Longmeadow.
Sure.
So answer this however you're comfortable answering this.
Absolutely.
As far as Longmeadow Public Schools themselves, and the direction, one of the roles of the school committee is to help set the direction that the schools the school district will go. So with that being said, what do you see Longmeadow Public Schools do well? What do you think we need to improve upon, and where do you see the school district heading?
Sure. So what I see Longmeadow Schools doing very well is that you all have provided a wonderful learning environment. The area, at least in comparison to some of the schools and districts I've worked in, it's conducive to learning. There are a lot of issues that may be faced from a behavioral or a socioeconomic background that some schools in some Title I districts in California, as well as Springfield, face that is not seen to the same degree in Longmeadow. So being able to leverage that into great learning environments. MCAS scores are high. Teachers love working here. I would know. I was applying when I was finishing up my clinical, and there was a really quick hire internally, and I said, wow, people really want to be here. And so to be able to see that is fantastic and is phenomenal. In terms of what Longmeadow schools could do better, a lot of it is tied in with, I suppose, the district improvement plan of narrowing that achievement gap, and that's something that I've I've gone into, and it's something that I've been working with. A lot of the same principles apply, working with enrichment and intervention, and having meaningful PLC structures put together where you are identifying exactly where students are, where they can be headed, working with, zone proximal development. And all of that aside, another thing to bring up, I suppose, is looking at behavioral health. We exist in a day and age that seems to be getting more and more tense and more stressful by the day. We have very, it's hostile out there in a lot of cases. Having an environment where students feel not just safe, but they feel nurtured, they feel respected, they feel as if they belong. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that you can ever have as a person in general, but especially as a student. And so making sure that that programs are in place, that students feel that sense of belonging, they feel that sense of safety and comfort with where they are. And so addressing that would obviously be a priority of mine.
Yes, I just wanted to ask one last question. I know previously you had mentioned you'd had some prior conversations with Dr. O'Shea before considering applying, and I know Dr. O'Shea had reached out to me and suggested
Yes.
that you reach out to me as the chair if you had any follow-up questions, which I didn't hear from you, which is regrettable because I would have loved the opportunity
Oh, no,
to
I'm
have
sure.
talked to you. So to piggyback on Karen's question, I guess, in terms of all of that and talking about our vision and moving forward, how specifically do you see the school committee playing a role in that and driving that kind of change and improvement?
Sure. And to address the first part, in reaching out to you, I had wanted to, but as I was reflecting on it and going, you know what, I don't want to go into this potential interview having had any sort of, preconceived notions, yours about me or mine about you, and by an extension the board. So please understand that was nothing personal at all.
Oh,
It
no,
was
I don't
literally
think so.
just my own, I have, all right, so I have this almost strange sense of propriety when it comes to anything. My wife will, and literally most of my friends will note that I'm a rule follower. I'm the kind of guy who will not cross the street if the red hand signal is up, regardless of if there's no cars going. Come on. I'm like, no, I just can't. So that was important to me. But with the question, looking at the role that a school committee plays in advancing those various policies and programs, the role is to collaboratively set them up. It is to identify, obviously within the range of budgetary constraints, of what can we do fiscally, educationally, social, emotional, within the districts. What sort of policies can we do? And we need to have the buy-in of administration because, well, at the end of the day, they have to implement it, right? So not only setting the parameters for action, but also providing the resources necessary to accomplish it, not just to, central office, but to school sites within the classrooms. And then ultimately, the role of evaluation for me is huge. I mean, it's part of that step in policy making is recognizing when things are working well and what you can do to continue them, and what things you're not doing so well, and what can you do to improve upon them. Is it absolutely, like, if in the case where it's really not working, do we scrap it? Do we reform it? What sorts of action needs to be taken? And that's something that all interested parties will need to work together on.
Just a quick follow-up. It's
Sure.
not even a question, just a
That's
comment. No offense taken on the no communication. If there's anything I've learned this year, you serve on this committee or the select board, you kind of leave your ego at the door. So there's no offense taken there. But thank you for your thoughtful response.
Sure.
Just a quick question, Mr. Ryan, about the same thing I asked Ms. Goldstein, about time as a public school teacher. Your days are pretty well occupied. How do you see your interactions with the school committee, which may not be just a 7 p.m. to beyond kind of situation?
I'll look at it this way. I've done it before, whether it was serving on the councils and boards and being liaison alternate to all these different coalitions and groups within the county. Again, it's something I've done before, and the other thing that my wife definitely takes issue with every once in a while, and same thing with my friends, is that I have this thing where I will make sure that my schedule is full. I'm always staying active, I'm always being engaged, and I would not be here right now if I didn't believe it was something that I could do. And it's something that I know that I can do, and I have done.
Thank you. Bronwyn?
I'll pass.
Okay. Bill?
Pass.
Ryan?
What's that?
Maureen?
Nothing, thank you.
Stephanie? Richard?
Pass.
Melanie?
Yeah, just another clarification. Somebody mentioned this being an empowerment program, so it's not magnet or charter, or so it's part of the Springfield Public Schools. Okay. So what was the mission statement for those children in developing
Gosh,
this?
I really should have it memorized right now. The mission for the Springfield Honors Academy is effectively to prepare our students to gain admission to and ultimately succeed in competitive four-year colleges and universities. That's an expectation. We have freshmen from last year who have been researching and said, I want to go to Harvard. And I said, you very well may. One that wants to go to Johns Hopkins, others that want to go to more local schools such as UMass, et cetera. We are having talks about potentially connecting with a Harvard extension program to provide for our upperclassmen. So our goal is to develop not only their academic abilities, but also to have them raised to be successful and contributing members of the community in which they live. So whether it's through the service learning program, through the World Scholar Seminar, or the coursework that we offer with real world application, it's what we set out to do, and we're laying that groundwork, and we're already seeing results, and we're very happy about it.
And there's been a lot of talk about gifted programs, or we don't have one, some schools do. What's the criteria for the students who become part of this? How do you?
Are you referring to our admissions process?
Yeah, how do you?
Sure. So,
define gifted.
to a degree, it's a multi-step process, and it's something that we've had to develop as time goes on. Primarily, we have various score ratings. So we'll look at your GPA. But we also recognize GPA isn't everything. On the one hand, you may have been in a less than conducive learning environment, and so your GPA may suffer. We've had some students that have come in that way before. Actually, a couple of my wife's former students, and she really strongly advocated for them to join, and they've done very well. There are other recognitions that perhaps you have a 4.0 GPA, but you did not have the most rigorous of coursework. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is looking at teacher and guidance counselor recommendations, saying, do you sincerely believe that this student will succeed at this academy, because it is difficult. We have students that come in, at least came in last year, and they believed, it's the Springfield Honors Academy, it's whatever. We've been through this before, and I've taught honors courses in Springfield before that. Nowhere near the level of rigor and challenge that we provided for them, and so they had sort of this disconnect, this sort of little mini meltdown, going, oh wait, this is an honors academy. We have these high expectations of us, and by and large, they have risen to that occasion. They have risen to that expectation. Our student who had the phenomenal increase in Lexile score, I would attribute that to the idea that he had gone to he went to South End Middle School, which is not noted for its academic rigor and a perhaps less than conducive learning environment. It basically just comes down to the environment that you're in. So those are the various criteria that we look at. There's an essay that's required, so we're able to gauge exactly where your level of writing is, and we try to get as big a picture of the student. We also do interviews, and again, trying to get that big picture of the student and say, okay, is this student the right fit for us, and are we the right fit for the student? And it's been working so far, and we're looking forward to it to continue to work. Thank you.
Tom?
Yes, so in your current position, you work with a very culturally diverse community, and Long Meadow is gradually becoming more culturally diverse.
Sure.
How would you speak to your role with the school committee in terms of helping the schools be more culturally sensitive? I mean, is there any initiatives you might consider, or?
Yeah. I mean, I can only really speak primarily from my own experience. I was trained to be a teacher within a diverse urban setting. It was for the 180 Days in Springfield program through UMass. So what we had focused on was what pedagogical practices and overall philosophies.
There's nothing to
Sorry.
I'll make sure whenever I said not to trigger that one.
I was really just checking the time.
Of having those philosophies and pedagogical practices that are found to be best for that particular setting. And wherever you work, you would hope that your pedagogy, that your cultural responsiveness is going to be responsive to the community. So if we had, as Long Meadow becomes more and more diverse, I think it would be important to, we talk about professional development, of reaching out to, I mean, not to make, shameless personal plugs, but I do know of a couple of professors who would be more than happy to come on in for that kind of thing. But, that's what it comes down to. I mean, a meaningful PD can go a long way. There are lots of PDs that, some people kind of like sit on their computers the entire time. They're lesson planning, they're grading. But at the same time, there are those PDs that really stand out to you as life-changing and as career-changing and as just transformational. I think that's critical because, it's not just students. It's the schools, it's the teachers, it's the administrators, and, making sure that they have the correct exposure, the proper exposure, and putting all of that in place is going to be huge, especially as Long Meadow, should become more and more diverse. It's a reality. Anytime that we make policy, anytime that we set a program in place, it has to always reflect realities. So I'd say that'd be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm all good, thank you.
Beth?
I just have a quick one, because I'm really intrigued by the Honors Academy.
Absolutely.
And forgive me if you may have mentioned this earlier in the evening, but just quickly, is it a standalone school, or would you describe it as a school within a school? So,
That was an identity piece that we definitely had to reckon with last year. We are considered the Springfield Honors Academy of Commerce. While we do have a separate space, we have a separate administration, we have a separate staff, we are housed within Commerce. That was part of a part of the Empowerment Zone partnership, was to take Commerce, which had qualified for the Empowerment Zone and for the turnaround intervention of establishing an Honors Academy there. And it's been kind of interesting to be a school within that capacity, because I have football players who will, one of them came up to me and said, "Coach, I walked by your hallway the other day." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It was really quiet up there." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What are you doing to them up there?" So I said, "Well, it's an interesting question." So I spoke with him about it, and he goes, "Oh." He goes, "Are you guys accepting for next year? We were just looking at this opportunity. Is that what you model and what you create, especially within a school, at least physically, can have a tremendous impact on what you have around you." We had gone to a PD where we got to observe classes at the Fitchburg Honors Academy, which is more integrated into the school over at Fitchburg High. And that it's a different dynamic, but it's something that has had a positive impact on the school as a whole. Yeah, again, we share a bell schedule, we share a physical premises, we share sports teams. And in some capacities, while we're still not on a per pupil funding, we do report to the same SPED coordinator through the school. But that's mostly for these little things that we cannot provide ourselves at our current time because of how small we are.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions, Mr. Ryan? Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And
September 4th, yes.
Yep. September 4th, right.
Thanks
Got
for your
it.
time.
Thank you.
Mr. Klotz, we appreciate you waiting, and we'd like to ask you to come up, please.
Thank you very much.
Uh,
Hello.
Right.
So let me guess, 3 minutes to give a personal statement?
You got it.
All right, so some people might look at this situation saying, he already got the questions, he already got the answers. It's not an advantage. It's actually a disadvantage, because now I have the difficult task of sitting in front of you, answering many of the same questions, while showing you that I have thoughts and ideas beyond those that have already been expressed. I have to do so not having coached athletics, not having taught classes, not having served on the school committee, not having been a lifelong resident of Longmeadow, and not having founded a school. I come to you with my resume. I'm a CPA, I'm an MBA, I've served as the town's audit chairman, I've ran for select board before and lost to Tom. But I'm here because I'm a parent. And I don't mean that I'm visual, I mean that I have 2 children. My daughter has an IEP. She's going to 3rd grade. She's been diagnosed with social pragmatic communication disorder. She has ADHD. She takes medication for that. She was identified at the JCC ELC as somebody who should be evaluated. She was evaluated by the town school facilities at Center. They said she didn't qualify. She went on, and I was a stay-at-home dad. I always knew there was something different about her. I read the books about high-spirited children. I listened to any advice I could get, but nothing seemed to make it so that she was normal to this uneducated father, comparing her to the other children in the room. She went to kindergarten. The kindergarten teacher said there's nothing wrong with her. That was at Blueberry. In between the ELC at the JCC, we sent her to Montessori, hoping that that would give her some different approach, calm her down. Didn't work. Undiagnosed in kindergarten. In 1st grade, her instructor said if this was my child, I would have her in front of a pediatric psychiatrist yesterday. And my wife finally acquiesced to me saying there's something wrong. No, there isn't. And we got a formal diagnosis. The only reason my daughter is succeeding now is because of the intervention of a 1st grade teacher. And that's why I'm here at the school committee, even though I've run for select board, even though I've served almost 10 years working at the city of Baltimore in a prior life, handling budgets of $330 million. I know that the work and effort of the professionals who this side of the room guides through their policy has a tremendous impact on the lives of children and their families. I have always worked, I've always tried to work with within the community to help people. Events in my personal life made it so that was not possible for the last 18 months or so. But now my life has stabilized. I'm going through a divorce. I'm living back in Longmeadow. And I want to contribute. So, for lack of a pre-written statement, that sums up why I'm here, why this position interests me. why I have the time. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'm a self-employed realtor. I play guitar. I have plenty of time. I have too much time on my hands. And I want to help. So let's fire away with the questions. Probably just say the first couple words and I'll know where you're going.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to change it up based on recognizing that you've been sitting here for almost 3 hours and you've
You can't
heard-
outbore me. I'm a CPA. We talk numbers all day.
You've heard pretty much everything, but because I didn't have a resume for you prior, so I'm going to base it off of what you've just told us in your little 3-minute. So you seem like a very strong advocate for your daughter, and I'm wondering, how do you transfer that into advocating for all of the district's children and broadening your
Sure,
agenda?
and that's a fair question. I mean, because you've had multiple students in the high schools come before the committee and come before the town and say the pressure is too great. I've also read a letter from my daughter to her 3rd grade teacher saying, I'm really excited, I want to help, and are the MCATs as stressful as they say they are? So we have a problem in the town that, from my perspective, is voiced at the higher grade levels and at the lower grade levels. And we also have a problem in the town where people don't feel comfortable coming up publicly to express concerns about some parts of the educational system, specifically the athletics has come up, where unfortunately the school committee has been in a position where they've had to balance the needs of anonymity with the justice of having an accusation be not faceless. The school committee members have to balance those overarching viewpoints. The fact that I'm a father of a child with an IEP simply means that I understand one aspect, but it doesn't mean that I don't have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It doesn't mean that I can't listen to what other people say and draw a conclusion. And I hope that I would be wise enough to listen and balance the needs of the community, because that's the appropriate thing to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Klotz, you commented about some of the concerns you have. How would you affect change, though, through the school committee, by being a member of the school committee?
Let's answer that first with conflict of interest. I have met with the policy committee because I've discovered a very minute point where policy is lacking. Change only comes from that which is written and accepted within the community, and sometimes it goes to a vote within the committee, and sometimes it goes to a vote to the whole committee. One person can propose something, but one person cannot individually make that proposal an affected action. So answering your question directly, how can I do it? I can't. I can be part of a team who does it. I can be part of a team who evaluates options. I can be part of a team who puts forth an argument that defends a certain course. But one person, nobody in this room can do more than come up with an idea. Then the idea has to be spread, shared, supported, disseminated, and finally enacted.
Thank you. Ron?
What do you think is the most critical issue for our schools?
There's been a lot said that's been very valid. I mean, from the budget, from the infrastructure, but did you read Maxi's Secret? I spoke with Amy, Principal Bastian, at the last PTO meeting. She was getting ready to unveil the book, but not quite ready to give out its title. And I said, I had checked with Ms. Malikin, Ms. Malik, what's her last name? Jara. I hadn't seen, despite being very active at the school, any faculty members who I thought might identify themselves as African American. So I asked, are there any members of the staff who are? And I don't know what's happened over the summer, but I was told, no, there aren't. We live in a bubble in Longmeadow. We're not in Flint. We're not in Puerto Rico. We're in a bubble. And one of the things that I find, let's use the word interesting, is that there's a lack of cultural diversity in our staff, at least at Blueberry. That may not be true across the sector. I don't have students in Wolf Swamp. I don't have students in Center. I don't have students yet in Williams or in, why do I always blank on thank you, or at the high school. But I think that cultural diversity, even if it's as simple as having a sister school or something like that, where we get exposed, where our children get exposed to people who are not as affluent and who do not speak the same, would be where we have a shortcoming. Because the real world is not Longmeadow. And we're doing a disservice to our children if we raise them to think it is.
Well, I'm going to ask the same question, otherwise all the other answers will be worthless. Describe your view of the roles of the school committee and the superintendent. What is the ideal relationship between the two?
All right. So, again, coming down to the challenge of how do you answer this without regurgitating what's been already said. My son, I have an obligation to. Certain rule structure. Okay? I'm not his friend, I'm his dad. And the superintendent is somebody who you supervise. You have to work with him, but you evaluate his contract, you effect discipline, you address issues within executive session that the rest of the town is not privy to. So you have to have a relationship that is much like that, where you're trying to ensure that someone can succeed while keeping them on path.
It's my turn, right?
Yep, go ahead,
All right,
Ryan.
just to make sure, sorry.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Can you give me some examples of ways that we could bring real-world applications into our schools?
Real world?
Yeah.
Are we talking about from a administrative standpoint or from a educational standpoint?
Student experience.
Student experience, okay. I just mentioned to, right off the bat, you could have a sister school, show them that there are worlds outside of Longmeadow. Previous question that was brought up was, who do you know that you could bring in to help? I don't know anybody. I mean, I would go to Nancy Creed. Nancy Creed is the chairperson of the Chamber of Commerce of Springfield, or Economic Development. She knows everybody. I don't know. I would say, hey, this is a question, this is a need, who do you know, what can we do? If that doesn't work, you go to the Young Professional Society. If that doesn't work, there are groups out there who have far better contacts and bigger Rolodexes than me. All right? But I am somebody who knows to go, to ask, and to listen.
Thank you.
Marie?
You've been watching and been involved with budgets throughout the years. Is there anything that you would recommend in the way of reforms for the budget or else for the budgetary process that we go through every year?
Well, this question really draws a line right here between the select board and their responsibility and the school committee and their responsibility. The school committee, in my role as the audit chairman, I had the opportunity to oversee some corrective actions with the school. Certain things were accounting mistakes, where certain leases of equipment should have been capitalized and they weren't, and therefore the purchase didn't go through the capital planning committee because you bought it and expensed it when it should have been capitalized. That's the iPad purchases. There are other situations where tighter internal controls could have been in place, gate receipts where we had $25,000 in cash from the football games that just sat undeposited for, it was over a month, I don't remember the exact time, and I made the joke at the time to the select board, I said, if I see $25,000 in cash, it better be in a police lineup with drugs and guns next to it. It shouldn't just be sitting there. There should be controls over that. And those, Mr. Mazur did implement those controls. But from a budgetary standpoint, the operating budget is what it is. I mean, you're going to have costs that continue to increase. You're going to have employee costs, you're going to have health insurance costs, you're going to have insurance costs. The only thing that's fixed is our debt service. That goes in one direction. Sometimes we're able to renegotiate it lower, but right now, the way the economy is going, that's not something that's on the table. So what can we do on that side? Unfortunately, it comes down to demographics, needs, and how many students can we fit in the classroom? How many teachers do we need? It's not a lot of wiggle room there. You know, you can cut some expenses, but identifying them here in an interview process, I don't want to put anything on the table. I want to listen to what you've discussed already. I mean, I have ideas, but I want to listen to where you are and then figure out where it can go. On this side of the room, mistakes have been made. Mistakes have been made. I have been a proponent I've only lived in town for 5 years, and I lived in Springfield for about 18 months before that, right at Georgetown condominiums, just over the line. We have independently approved a DPW, a senior center, when we've known that there was a need for a middle school. And I'm not disagreeing with the placement of the DPW. I think it was a good solution. But I'm disagreeing with not trying to incorporate a strategic, overarching plan in prior years. Now we've got ourselves to a point where these things have been approved, and we still have the middle school problem. The debt service for some of the elementary schools is going to roll off in a couple of years, so that'll free up some budgetary room. We can always do Proposition 2.5 overrides for non-operating expenses, so debt can be approved that way if the town so votes for it. But in terms of where do we cut on this end to fund this end, you're not going to cut police, you're not going to cut fire. Personally, I consider DPW to be equivalent because who's out there cleaning up the mess when disaster strikes? So now you're down to what? Rec and Parks, Council on Aging, a couple other agencies. They're not high-dollar agencies. It's a tight budget. I've heard Mark screaming about it. I've heard Richard screaming about it. I've heard the Finance Committee come up with some complaints. But the severity of this issue, I think, has not yet been expressed in a manner where the townsfolk get it. It's tight. It's tight. And it may come down to making those unpopular decisions. Where do you cut? You know, do you cut the strings? Do you cut the athletics? And by strings, I mean music. I don't know what the solution is, but I understand the severity of the problem. And I understand it from a macro level, and I get it from, oh my God, we're going to cut the school resource officer, or we're going to cut the school adjustment counselor. I get it. That hits me. That hits my family. But that doesn't get rid of a teacher. So what the answer is, I don't know.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Pass.
Yes, yeah. Richard?
Yeah, it's becoming increasingly more difficult tonight to rank all the candidates. We've been blessed by having,
Well, I clearly come without the experience.
I'll give you a chance. We've been blessed, sincerely blessed by having a lot of very talented people stand before us and give good answers to some good questions. I would like to know what makes you stand out above all of them. That's a different question.
I have the time. I am a realtor who's really bad at it. Okay, because I'm opinionated and people don't like that. I do not have a full-time employment. I'm going through a divorce from a very successful doctor. I've got 5 years of statutory alimony. It's not debatable. I'm looking for work, but I can be selective. And I'd much rather be my own boss and do things that I like and care about than go work for somebody else. And I have the luxury of doing that right now. What makes me different? I have the time.
Okay.
Melanie?
What are some examples of what Long Meadow schools are doing well?
I'm sorry, would you please say that a little
What are
louder?
some examples of what Long Meadow schools are doing well?
Okay. We have a ton of banners hanging in the gymnasium. Ton of banners. We have a very supportive community where money is raised to the point where the PTOs don't know how to spend it. We seem to have, at least from my experience, faculty who genuinely care and are excited to come to school. And from what I've heard tonight, an environment where people want to keep applying so that if we identify a weakness, we could adjust. Long Meadow Public Schools seems to do very well at encouraging the town's people to vote for new items that may not be able to be provided for through the budget process, overrides, if you will. Our academics, if you judge it by students who go to college, do great. If you judge it by the level of stress that they voice about, well, the world's a hard place is one way of looking at it, and we're preparing you for it. And the other way to look at it is, at what level do we want to turn the screws on this pressure environment, this pressure cooker? Long Meadow Public Schools does more right than they do wrong. My wife and I chose to move to Long Meadow for the schools. But Long Meadow Public Schools does a lot bad too. And just looking at the boilers, the roofs, I mean, it's not just the schools, it's the town. And I just want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't sit in front of this group and give a shout out to DPW. I was going for a bike ride in town one day, and I live at Fernwood, it's one side of town. I biked all the way down Long Meadow Street to Maple, and then I went out and I biked around Glenbrook. And I think it was the day after DPW had just finished their graffiti removal project, because I biked around the fence outside that school, and then I biked around the school, and I couldn't find a single piece of graffiti other than the ghost writing through covered up paint on that red trailer. I don't know if you've seen it. That somebody loves something. It wasn't the typical anger message. It was actually a positive message, but they covered that up as well. And me, not living in the Glenbrook area, thought, oh wow, this school has no graffiti. And I thought, wow, that's really different than Williams. But then I was speaking with one of the local police officers, and he said, oh no, there was a remediation project. But there's a pride. There's a pride at all the school levels. You know, people are proud to go to their elementary school. They're proud of which middle school they go to, and they're proud to go to the high school, and they're proud to say it. And they're proud to be second and third generation people in this town who deeply love it. So what do the schools do right? All of that. But it's not just the schools, it's also the town. I mean, it'd be myopic to say that it's these 6 people who are responsible. Sorry, Marty.
Thank you. Tom, you all set? Yeah, Tom?
Okay, big surprise question. No,
So
same.
what I think is that,
So,
you are going to ask about the 4 different options?
Yeah,
All right.
5, well, 4, 5, yeah. What do you think?
Again, hindsight is 20/20. I thought that we could combine this and have some overall reaching project. But I am not for putting 6-year-olds in with 13 and 14-year-olds.
No, no
I'm
case your
I'm
way.
just not. So then it comes down to the other options, which are 1 school versus 2 separate schools.
Oh, no, there's one more option. There's 2 separate schools. There's 1 school housing all the students, and then there's a building with 2 schools in it.
I would really like to approach that from the pragmatic angle of what are the numbers, how does it work? You know, if we get rid of one site, how can we develop that site? How can we make it being a revenue-producing parcel for the town, because we don't have any industrial, we have very little commercial. You know, this is a town that there are a few other towns in the state, is based off a residential, single tax rate. And we face those concerns, and they're legitimate. I'd like to see the numbers on that. My gut tells me that monetizing one of those parcels and building either 1 school or 2 schools on 1 lot would make the most sense economically for the town going future, but I wouldn't want to propose that without having solid numbers to defend it.
Mm-hmm. Karen?
My question is regarding the school committee goals, and if you have any familiarity with the current goals of the school committee, and if you do, if they align with your goals and where you see the district heading.
Well, the school committee has put forth goals which are admirable, and I don't disagree with any of them. But again, I feel that multiculturalism is lacking, and I would add that to it.
Yeah?
Pass on all set, thanks.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Is that
too.
good or bad?
Oh, no, it's, you were able to offer some insight in the other questions.
Robert?
Pass.
Okay, Bill?
No, I'm good.
Ryan?
What are some characteristics you would expect of the superintendent? What would you be looking for?
The superintendent, none of this is directed towards you. The superintendent has to represent the town to the audiences that we don't go to. The state, the outside, the town meetings, whatever they are, I don't really know. But I know that's the role. Inside, he's the leader. He has to have his administrative staff motivated. They have to communicate his message, the message to the line staff. But this has to be somebody who's skilled in politics, because we are seeking a political solution. We have, you know, the SOIs originally were a big, complicated process. This year it was kind of just, let's repackage it and throw it in. But that is seeking a political solution. And it's the superintendent's face who's out meeting with those lawmakers and meeting with those gatekeepers. So, you know, I really do feel that in addition to the inside the town motivational type of duties, the overseeing the administrative staff, it's very key for a superintendent to be skilled at reaching out and advocating for the town's needs at the state level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marie, you have anything else?
Thank you.
Stephanie?
I'm good.
You're all set. Richard?
One more.
Yep.
Back to the SOI.
Okay? I haven't read it in like 2 years.
Yeah. It's good bedtime reading. If we don't get it, just ask the same question. What's your plan?
What's my plan?
We got two schools. that-
I do not like deferred maintenance. I'm somebody who says, you know, we have an obligation to provide an environment that is safe to not only our students, but our employees.
Okay, well, let me stop you there, because that's indicating that they're not safe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We
Now,
can't
it's
go into that
indicating that I
detail.
feel that if we do nothing,
Yeah.
it can become unsafe.
Okay, well, let me continue, and then you can answer the whole thing. We could be looking at a 7-year
I
window.
mean, we just had a year, but pardon me, but we just had a year where there were lots of discussions regarding, oh my God, how do we end the school year on different days? Because we had some schools that were closed for certain periods of time due to too cold an environment.
But that was mechanical failures that happened. Heating systems went out.
Which is deferred maintenance.
No, it was 11 degrees below zero, and they weren't prepared for that. It's climate change. We're going to change as we go. We just had flooding on some of our buildings. It never happened before, too. Anyway, get away from that question. If we have a 7-year plan, I would like to know, what are your thoughts on what we should be doing tomorrow with the two schools that we have? What is your approach?
I don't know if this is legal. I would ask counsel. But I would make sure that dollars are spent on one facility, because we can bus the kids to the facility for handicap accessibility. I would make sure roofs are solid. I would make sure heating, climate control is there. And make sure that the buildings are structurally sound and operational so that they can continue to provide a learning environment. They may not be the best learning environment. They may not compare to our new college-level high school. But to do nothing is globally. Let's step back. Globally, the country is experiencing the longest bull market it's ever experienced. Bull markets don't go on forever. And at some point, the economy will stop accelerating at the pace it's going and perhaps even dip. And when it does, that's going to affect the coffers at the federal level, which trickle down to the state level, which is where the SOI money is that we're looking for. So if that happens, the SOI money won't be there. If we're not planning for that eventuality, we're being myopic and not being good fiscal stewards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Melanie, you have any?
Is there anything that you would change? You mentioned some pros and cons.
I think there should be more singing in the world.
I'm sorry, singing?
More singing in the world.
Music?
Change in terms of what?
Well, you just referenced some issues, some problems, concerns. If you came on and you could make a directive or set a vision or a tone to steer something in a new direction, is there anything in particular that jumps out that you'd like to seek an improvement or change?
I'd like to think about that. I'm somebody who likes to collaborate and not.
Okay.
Tom, you have any?
Yeah, Jeff, you've talked about how we have to know the numbers and sort of making fiscal decisions and so forth. But as a father, as you put down, I mean, how would you say being a father will affect your participation in the school committee?
I missed one PTO meeting. I volunteered for Blueberry Has Talent. I don't have a lot of one-day symposiums that I've done. I haven't found in a school. I have tons of time. As a father who has had his children attend 2 different private schools, the public school, as a father who was responsible for taking his kids to gymnastics, to ninja, to swim lessons, to dance, taught them to ski, taught them to ride bicycles so that on their first day of kindergarten they could both ride there. I have had the opportunity to talk with and listen to people from a vast background. And I find that I learn the most from listening. My kids, you know, as much as my daughter faces challenges, my son, his last teacher described him as the student he wishes all the other kids were, and a leader. I mean, I'm parenting kids at two opposite ends of the spectrum. And he has tons of friends. I see what makes it easy for him, and I see what makes it hard for her. So when you talk about terms that I'd never heard about before tonight, where you have different level kids in the same classroom, there was a term for it that you used, where some are reading at a first grade level and some are reading at a fourth grade level. Differentiation, I think it was. I'd never heard that term before tonight. As a father, I understand that there are going to be kids who are going to strike out at T-ball, and there are going to be kids who can hit it over the fence. And you have to... I was talking with my son. He got a little trophy, participation. And I told him, man, everybody gets one. It means nothing. I think that there's a tendency sometimes to over-coddle our children. And I also think that there's a tendency in some circumstances to put too much pressure on them. As a father, I'd like to be the guy who tells the parent who's too aggressively involved in the cheering of the sports, hey, come on, they're kids. But I also want to be the one who says, hey, your kid can do it. Don't hold them back. Let them try. You know, an example of that is I was the only person who voted against PTO funding. They decided to fund a 4.5-foot climbing wall for Blueberry Elementary School at the tune. It's going to be $14,000, but they put aside $7,000. And I'm looking at my son, who is, you know, in first grade at the time. He's the shortest kid in the class, and he can scale the wall at Bliss Park, Mr. Potato Head Park. That climbing wall, he can scale right over it, up, down. I don't watch him. I'm not worried about him falling. And this wall that they're putting in is like less than half that height for K through 6 or 5, K through 5. And I thought it didn't make any sense. And I wasn't against the idea. I voiced it very clearly. I said, let's take this money and spend it on something a little more challenging. As a father, I felt that if the kid can't climb all the way up, so what? Let that be the goal. You know, if they're running, you ever watch American Ninja Warrior, 10-foot wall, if they can't make it up, let that be the goal. And then they move it to a 12 and then a 14 and too much. But as a father, I think that there's a time where you have to help people understand that they're pushing a little too hard and help people understand that they need to be a little less coddling.
Thank you. Karen, you have
I'm all set, thank you.
have any, just go around another round that you...
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Ryan, you had asked. If anybody else has something, please jump in, but Richard?
I'm done.
No, Melanie? No? Anybody else have any other questions? No? Mr.
So the one question that wasn't asked, why didn't I run for the office when the election happened? And at that time, 6 months before that, when the decision would have to be made, I was not living in town. My housing situation, my divorce was still not at a point where I was able to be focused on something else. So that's why I did not run.
Thank you.
That's a freebie.
No, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Klotz. Again, I want to thank all 5 of our candidates for applying. I really appreciate it. Just before we close, just a comment to the Combined School Committee and Select Board that we will be meeting, I think this is a broken record, Tuesday, September 4th, 7 p.m. We have a regular scheduled Select Board meeting, so this will be the first meeting on the Select Board agenda. Just so everybody knows, the voting is by roll call, an open roll call vote, and we'll be doing it in the reverse order in which questions were asked. So it'll be a roll call vote. We do, again, require that a candidate receive a majority of the votes that are cast. And so If that doesn't happen on the first round, we eliminate the person with the fewest votes and then re-vote, and we will continue to do that. Hopefully not that long, but as long as it does take. So again, you did get the procedures will go out again, and the voting rules will go out. If any other comments from anybody, questions about the process?
No, not about the process, but I would just, again, like to thank all of the candidates for coming out tonight and seeking a seat on the school committee. It is really meaningful work, and I really valued being able to listen to all of what you would bring to the table. So thank you.
I think we speak for all. I'll accept the motion to adjourn. I don't know if I can do that for a joint meeting, but is there a second?
So moved here, and somebody over there so moved.
Is there a second? Okay, and all those in favor? Meeting's adjourned at 10:25. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you all.
Do you want your bag?
Give me a second.
The next.
I don't want my numbers back.
Save those for 3 or 4 years.
But then there's
The
something
bag
that-
will
Oh,
get-
he likes doing this and other things, too.
Your Yankee swap.
The process worked.
You're right.